Hello there and welcome back to the Sleepy Science, where the past is always bigger, louder, and far more volcanic than you remember. You're standing in the middle of a vast desert plain, except it's not just sand. It's ash, sizzling and blackened. The horizon rumbles. Towering clouds erupt from the earth like angry steam vents, filling the sky with soot. The ground beneath your feet trembles with tectonic uncertainty. It's not even a proper continent yet, just a bruised piece of a giant jigsaw puzzle known as Pangaea. The year is somewhere around 235 million BC, give or take a million. The planet is hot, cranky, and in no mood for visitors. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments, just for fun. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through this primeval furnace, dodging lava flows and watching your sandals melt from the ambient heat. Volcanoes loom across the scarred landscape, belching out carbon dioxide like overworked espresso machines. The air stings. The plants are scraggly survivors of whatever came before, and somewhere in the murk, something small is scurrying between the ferns. That something looks like a reptile that forgot how to walk like one. It's Eoraptor, a name that sounds like a sci-fi villain but translates to dawn thief. Not even waist-high, but quick, lean, and oddly upright. This is one of the earliest known dinosaurs. But the world it lives in, absolutely bonkers, because dinosaurs didn't rise to dominance on a peaceful planet. They did it in a fever dream of extinction events. The Permian-Triassic extinction, that little apocalypse 20 million years before this moment, wiped out over 90% of marine life and a solid chunk of land creatures. The aftermath, an ecological vacancy sign as big as a continent. Enter the archosaurs. Archosaurs, your new overlords, are the grand old family that gave rise to both crocodiles and dinosaurs. And yes, those two were cousins before they hated each other. Early on, it wasn't obvious which cousin would win. Some of the crocline archosaurs were fast, armored, and terrifyingly adaptable. But the dinosaur line, small, upright, and persistent, started inching into the empty spaces left behind by mass extinction. Think of it like evolutionary couch surfing. You don't need to dominate at first. You just need to not die. The Earth itself is no helper. Pangaea is dry in the middle with violent seasonal swings. There are mega monsoons followed by brutal droughts. Lightning dances across bone-dry plains, starting wildfires that no one bothers to put out. In this chaos, only the scrappiest survive. Eoraptor and its ilk don't look like much, but they've got just the right combo: flexible hips, lightweight skeletons, and a weirdly efficient walk that lets them travel further without overheating. Think prehistoric Prius. Historians still argue whether Eoraptor was strictly a carnivore or more of an opportunistic omnivore. Its teeth hint at a bit of both. But that's kind of the point. In a world like this, flexibility is everything, especially when your neighbors include armored reptiles that look like budget ankylosaurs, semi-aquatic beasts with jaws too big for their own heads, and insects the size of your hand. You crouch by a stream that smells like boiled eggs in despair. Nearby, a herd of salsaurids, those awkward almost dinosaurs, grazes nervously, always a little too slow to react. One gets snagged by a roysuchian, a croc relative on stilts that roars like an asthmatic car engine. Blood spatters the ferns. Another goes down. You stay quiet. You are, after all, not built for this era. But the thing is, neither were the dinosaurs, not really. They're late to the evolutionary party. Mammal ancestors, therapsids, have been around for ages. Crocodile kin were already here, flexing their jaws. Even the first true dinosaurs show up quietly. No thunder, no cinematic reveal. just a gradual takeover like mold creeping across forgotten bread. Only later would the fossil record, fickle as it is, retroactively crown them kings. And yet here's the quirky bit. There's a theory, not universally accepted, that climate chaos in the late Triassic actually helped the dinosaurs sneak ahead. Their more erect posture made them more efficient at moving and breathing in the thin, hot air. They didn't tire as quickly. That meant they could cover more ground, follow herds, and, over time, replace their slower cousins. Evolution through sheer mileage. But it wasn't just about walking better. The Triassic world was unstable, and instability favors the strange. Dinosaurs diversified because they were adaptable, yes, but also because their competitors kept dying out. Mass extinction events are like hitting reset on the evolutionary game, and every time that happened, dinosaurs just didn't die. Not all of them, anyway. You watch as a Coelophysis slinks into view, tall, thin, with a sly glint in its eye. It snatches a lizard and bolts into the underbrush, legs pumping like pistons. It's not flashy. It's not armored. But it's fast, it's smart, and it's got that look of something that will be around for a while. It's also oddly social. Scientists debate whether Coelophysis hunted in packs or just died in groups, but either way, something about them hints at the next stage of dominance. Still, things don't look destined. For now, dinosaurs remain small players in a big, angry theater. They aren't the stars yet. They're background characters on a planet still deciding what its plot is. Even the mighty prosauropods, those long-necked prototypes, haven't really bulked up yet. But you can feel it. Something is shifting. You lean against a half-charred tree trunk, listening to distant thunder and closer footfalls. The scent of scorched earth and ozone fills your lungs. The sky darkens not from nightfall, but from ash. Somewhere, another volcano is waking up, again. And in the margins of this instability, dinosaurs endure. You follow the scurrying shape of a creature half your height and twice as fast, dodging under fallen logs and threading through bramble thickets of horsetails and ancient conifers. The forest is restless, still reeling from volcanic tantrums and climate mood swings. But down here among the ferns, life is busy doing what life always does, trying to out-evolve the thing that wants to eat you. The Triassic may have birthed dinosaurs, but the early Jurassic is where their awkward adolescence plays out in real time. Think braces, mood swings, and a whole lot of running in every evolutionary direction at once. Right now, you're trailing the descendants of Eoraptor and its cohort, two major lineages that will define much of the Mesozoic, the Saurischians and the Ornithischians. These two clades sound like something you'd mumble through at a museum field trip, but they're about to shape the world in some very weird ways. Saurischians are the lizard-hipped crew, and among them are the predators, theropods, and the long-necked sauropods, the Ornithischians. Bird-hipped, ironically, not the ancestors of birds at all, but a gang of quirky plant-eaters that include things like stegosaurs, hadrosaurs, and the forever confused triceratops. You pause as two small Ornithischians bumble past you, hind limbs pumping like wind-up toys. Their tails stick out for balance, heads down, chewing absent-mindedly on cycads. They're early versions of what will one day become massive armored tanks or duck-billed vacuum cleaners, but for now they're humble, skittish little things. Scutellosaurus, maybe. It's got small, bony plates down its back, a fashion choice that's more experimental than defensive. Like it can't decide if it wants to be a porcupine or a traffic cone. And here's a fun tidbit. The earliest Ornithischians might have been bipedal. For all their later quad-legged lumbering, they start out as agile little runners. Some paleontologists suggest their sudden radiation across different ecosystems was helped by their ability to adapt quickly, shorter bodies, improved chewing mechanics, better social behavior. Historians still argue whether their success was about strategy or just a lucky ecological vacancy. But for now, you watch them melt into the foliage, leaving behind only rustling ferns and a slightly squashed beetle. Meanwhile, the Saurischians are getting dramatic. You hear it before you see it. Heavy footsteps like boulders rolling over a drum. A prosauropod lumbers into view, long-necked and vaguely confused, like someone stretched a Komodo dragon and gave it anxiety. Platysaurus, probably. It's not quite the titanic sauropods of later years, but it's thinking about it. You can see the ambition in its eyes. It rears up slightly to nibble higher foliage, balancing awkwardly on its thick tail. This creature, part predator past, part herbivore future, is a transitional oddball, and it's not alone. Herding behavior is starting to show up. You spot 3 more platysaurs trailing behind, wary but calm. Moving in groups helps when the forests are dense and predators are becoming a real problem. Speaking of which, your ears pick up a high-pitched bark followed by frantic crashing through undergrowth. A theropod, lean and long-limbed, bolts past in pursuit of something. It's probably a Dilophosaurus, known for its twin crests and a toothy grin that makes your spine tight. This thing is not big enough to star in a blockbuster, but it's fast, agile, and sharp in all the places that count. It's also an early blueprint for every predatory dinosaur to come. Streamlined skeleton, powerful legs, clawed hands that look like they've never typed a gentle email. Here's a quirky fact to chew on while you watch this predator chase its lunch. Despite what movies suggest, Dilophosaurus probably didn't spit venom or fan its neck out like a deranged lizard. That was Hollywood flair. In reality, it likely relied on speed and a surprisingly delicate bite. Its jaw structure suggests it wasn't as bone-crushing as you'd expect. Historians still argue whether it hunted solo or cooperatively, but either way, it's clear this design works. The theropods are evolving towards something leaner. You step carefully over a fallen log teeming with beetles the size of pastries, trying not to slip into the stream where prehistoric amphibians lounge like overgrown sausages. The world around you is humid, dense with tangled growth, and filled with creatures that haven't yet sorted out whether they want to walk upright or crawl awkwardly like toddlers in snow pants. Transitional forms are everywhere. This is the Jurassic's messy middle school phase. And it's glorious. You notice the claws of early Maniraptorans, those feathered ancestors of future birds, scratching tree bark a few meters up. They're small, clever, and full of nervous energy. Not yet flight-ready, but already experimenting with feathers for insulation or display. That future will arrive later. For now, they're just trying to stay ahead of anything that snarls. You pass the remains of a dinosaur nest, buried shallow in a patch of moss and fern. Small oval eggs, some crushed, others still intact. A few show faint impressions of skin, scaly, patterned, almost delicate. You feel like a museum exhibit just blinked at you. It's easy to forget that dinosaurs weren't just stomping movie monsters. They nested, protected their young. Some may have even brooded like birds. This quiet, vulnerable part of their life rarely gets the spotlight. You pause as a sudden gust kicks up pollen, thick and yellow, coating your nose and making you sneeze loudly. Somewhere in the woods, a Dryosaurus startles and bolts. You offer an awkward apology to the air. Your only company is a beetle that seems deeply unimpressed. And then the sun begins to set, casting long shadows through the prehistoric canopy. You sit on a lichen-covered rock, muscles sore from walking through deep time. Behind you, the scurrying and chirping don't stop. The forest lives on, loud and unashamed. Here in this dino-soaked jungle, the world is still deciding who gets to thrive. The lines between predator and prey, herbivore and opportunist, are fuzzy. Limbs lengthen, jaws narrow, spines curve. Each generation tinkers, mutates, and nudges the blueprint forward. No one species rules the land just yet, but the foundations are set. The small hunters, the awkward cousins, and the herding hopefuls, they are all building momentum. In a few million years, their grandchildren will make the earth tremble. But for now, they're just trying not to trip over their own feet. You crouch at the edge of a cracked mudflat, watching something with far too many teeth drag its belly across the sun-baked earth. It doesn't blink, doesn't speak, just slides like a prehistoric torpedo with legs. That right there is a phytosaur. Not technically a crocodile, but you'd be forgiven for thinking it was. The long snout, the armored back, the mean-spirited eyes, it's all very familiar. And for a moment you wonder, what if these were the creatures that had won? Because for a while they almost did. This is the late Triassic again, around 210 million years ago, and while dinosaurs are awkwardly experimenting with being slightly less weird, the croc-line archosaurs are absolutely thriving. Some walk on two legs, some gallop, some have weird sailbacks or enormous armored plating. One, Postosuchus, even looks like someone gave a crocodile a gym membership and let it dream big. It's fast, nearly top of the food chain, and not shy about it. You keep your distance as one of these brutes drags a freshly trampled reptile through the reeds, its jaws locked so tight you can hear the bone grind. Its hind legs thud like battering rams, kicking up clouds of dust that sting your eyes. Dinosaurs are here, sure, but they're not in charge. Not yet. You move silently, threading your way along the bank of a shallow swamp. Croc relatives called Dinosaurs plod through the muck nearby, their bodies wrapped in bony plates like walking waffle irons. They're herbivores, but not the peaceful kind. Those shoulders look like they could shove through a wall. They grunt and snort like steam-powered tractors, carving paths through cattails taller than you. You wonder how the early dinosaurs competed with these armored tanks, and well, they didn't always win. For a time, croc-line archosaurs were in nearly every niche. Semi-aquatic ambush hunters, check. Land-dwelling predators, check. Plant-munching bulldozers, also check. They had the diversity, the numbers, and the anatomical weirdness that made them look like evolution was just showing off. If you were betting on who would run the next 100 million years, you'd probably bet on the crocs. Historians still argue whether it was pure luck or climatic catastrophe that shifted the balance. But there's one smoking gun in the fossil record. A whole lot of extinction lines that suddenly stop right around the Triassic-Jurassic boundary. Around 201 million years ago, the Earth throws yet another tantrum, this time in the form of massive volcanic eruptions linked to the Central Atlantic magmatic province. Basalt floods the land. Carbon dioxide levels spike. Oceans become more acidic. Rain turns to acid slush. It's not a good time to be a fragile specialist. And that, weirdly enough, is where dinosaurs shine. Because while the croc-line archosaurs were many things, they weren't great at bouncing back. Dinosaurs, on the other hand, had bodies built for weirdness and lungs built for bad days. Literally. Some paleontologists argue that early saurischians already had bird-like air sacs in their respiratory systems, which might have helped them breathe more efficiently during all the gas and ash nonsense. They also had upright posture, a key advantage when temperatures spike and food gets scarce. Efficiency becomes survival. So the tide turns. The extinction hits hard, wiping out most of the crocodilian cousins in their prime. Phytosaurs, gone. Postosuchus, toast. Only a few croc-line hangers on make it through, the smaller, semi-aquatic types that would eventually become today's crocodiles. But the stage is now wide open, and dinosaurs don't hesitate. You stroll across what used to be a floodplain and is now a cracked basin of fossilized opportunity. Small theropods stalk through the brush, their heads twitching like curious birds. Coelophysis is still around, a relic of the Triassic holding strong. But now it's joined by a fresh wave of survivors, leaner and more specialized. Predators learn to be stealthier. Herbivores get pickier. Evolution is hitting the gas. A group of prosauropods, maybe massospondylus, graze under twisted pines, their long necks snaking between branches. You watch one carefully nip a pinecone, crunch it, and spit the woody bits onto the ground. Efficiency again. These aren't giant sauropods yet, but they're clearly working out the kinks. One slips on a rock, catches itself with a surprisingly delicate foot, and gives you a brief side-eye. You nod in respect. Here's a quirky paleontological footnote for you. Some early croc-line species may have had erect posture too. They walked like dinosaurs before dinosaurs made it fashionable. But what they didn't do was diversify fast enough. In the evolutionary lottery, that hesitation cost them everything. You wade through a marshy corridor as the sun cuts through the fog, and you can almost hear the gears of natural selection grinding forward. It's not just about strength or speed anymore. It's about strategy. Which animals can tolerate long droughts? Who can make use of sparse plant life? Who can outrun or outwit a hungry predator when there's nowhere to hide? Over time, dinosaurs prove better answers to those questions. One last etosaur, battered and alone, stumbles past you. Its armor is cracked, one eye milky with age. It's a living fossil in its own time, outmatched by nimbler, faster forms. A coelophysis darts from the trees, snarls and lunges. The etosaur jerks sideways but stumbles. The chase is brief, brutal, and over. And just like that, another branch on the archosaur family tree snaps. And yet the croc-line legacy isn't gone. It just shrinks, retreats to the swamps and rivers, waiting. The survivors dig in, slow down, and bide their time. You think of them when you next see a crocodile do absolutely nothing for 8 hours straight and somehow still terrify everything around it. That's the legacy. Survive by outweighting everyone else. But for now, you take one last look at the battlefield of extinction. Dinosaurs didn't win by brute force. They won because their rivals couldn't keep up when the world melted down. They were weird. They were light on their feet. And most importantly, they were lucky. You breathe in the thick, soupy air and feel the pull of deep time shifting again. A new age is coming. One where dinosaurs will finally stretch their legs and start running the show. But you'll always remember the near miss. The era where crocodile cousins almost claimed the crown. Almost. You awaken to a rhythmic thud beneath your feet, like distant drums wrapped in earth. Each pulse feels heavier than the last, and when you look up, well, you don't see much at first. Just mist, dew clinging to wide, flat leaves, and the strange quiet that settles over a forest before something enormous enters it. Then you feel the shadow move. It's not just one of them. It's a herd, and they're not shy about taking up space. Say hello to the sauropodomorphs. They're still figuring themselves out, these long-necked experiments in biological overkill. You squint through the rising fog and spot a volcanodon stepping delicately over a fallen log. Volcanodon meaning volcano tooth, which sounds like either a metal band or a very angry dentist, is one of the earliest known true sauropods. Long neck, check. Column-like legs, check. Size that makes you feel like pocket lint, absolutely. But it's still small compared to what's coming. Think elephant-sized rather than school bus with a tail. Still, there's something quietly audacious about it. These creatures are already dabbling in gigantism. While earlier plant-eaters fussed with chewing efficiency or body armor, sauropodomorphs seem to have glanced at the ecosystem and thought, what if we just got really big and didn't worry about anyone biting us? You sidestep a steaming pile of sauropod droppings, an unavoidable feature of this biome, and glance at the trees they're slowly deforesting. Their long necks sway like cranes, reaching high into canopies untouched by smaller grazers. Evolution, it seems, is starting to reward verticality, and with all that height comes all the weird adaptations. Giant lungs, air sacs, stomachs big enough to ferment entire forests, and bones that look solid but are secretly laced with air pockets to keep the weight down. Here's a mainstream historical note for you. The rise of sauropods roughly coincides with the early Jurassic stabilization of Earth's climate after the chaos of the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. With less volcanic nonsense in the atmosphere and more reliable rain cycles, plant life flourishes. Forests expand. That means more food for giant herbivores. And the bigger the body, the more energy you can process, assuming you don't mind spending most of your life eating. You sit on a mossy boulder and watch the herd move in slow, deliberate unison. There's a grace to it. Neck to tail, they form a sort of biological rhythm, each footfall a note in a deep, ancient drumbeat. The young ones stay near the middle, flanked by towering adults who glare at passing theropods like nightclub bouncers. And in this moment it clicks. This is more than survival. This is dominance, earned 1 meter of neck at a time. Of course, historians still argue whether early sauropods lived in tightly knit social groups or looser associations. Some fossil beds suggest mass deaths of entire herds, while others show scattered bones hinting at solitary lifestyles. But when you're watching a line of 12 vulcanodons file silently through morning mist, it's hard not to imagine them as a family. A curious juvenile breaks off from the group and meanders your way, its nostrils flaring as it sniffs your unfamiliar scent. Its eyes are enormous, pupils dilated, expression vaguely surprised, like someone who just discovered stairs for the first time. You stay still, heart thudding, and the creature snorts, then rumbles back toward its elders. You realize with some relief that it had no idea what you were and didn't really care. That's the thing about being massive. You can afford a little indifference. You push deeper into the forest, tracing the sauropod trail through crushed ferns and tree bark scuffed smooth by brushing flanks. Up ahead, something else moves smaller but fast. Ankylosaurus, maybe. It's one of the transitional sauropodomorphs, not quite the massive quadruped its cousins are becoming, but no longer the gangly biped it once was. It walks with the awkward confidence of someone switching from rollerblades to skis halfway through a dance. Still, it manages, and it's clearly found a niche as a more mobile, adaptable feeder. And here's a quirky tidbit. Fossilized sauropodomorph footprints sometimes show a curious mid-gait twist, as if the creatures walked with their palms facing inward. Paleontologists used to think they plodded like elephants, palms down and splayed, but newer evidence suggests a more nuanced, upright posture, less waddling fridge and more tree-trimming giraffe on stilts. As the sun climbs higher, the air warms and the scents of the forest sharpen. Pine resin, crushed leaves, and that unmistakable musk of large herbivore. It's not exactly pleasant, but it's oddly grounding. You pause at the edge of a rocky outcrop and take it all in. The sprawling valley below, ringed by distant volcanic ridges, dotted with slow-moving shadows that shift and sway with every step. This is the age of giants in its infancy. And you begin to notice something new. Wherever sauropods appear, the landscape begins to change. Trees grow taller, spaced further apart. Underbrush thins. Some plants adapt to being stripped regularly, while others retreat into thorniness. It's not just that dinosaurs are living in the environment, they're remaking it. Back near the water's edge, a cluster of primitive cycad trees sways in the wind. Sauropodomorphs graze lazily nearby, their long necks looping down like cranes to strip foliage. Their tails sweep side to side, unconcerned with anything behind them. One whips a curious predator squarely in the jaw and continues munching, utterly uninterested in whatever just got concussed. You find yourself smiling, maybe from the absurdity, maybe from the growing realization that this experiment with size, slowness, and simplicity is working. The sauropods aren't apex predators. They don't have fangs or armor, but they've stumbled into something equally potent: scale. When you're this big and your only real job is to eat, grow, and keep moving, there's not much that can stop you. The sun dips behind a cloud, casting the forest in cooler tones. Somewhere, a distant thunderclap rolls, not a storm, just another giant taking a step. The ground answers with its own reply. And as you move with the herd, dwarfed by necks and legs and bones the size of motorcycles, you realize you're witnessing the first chapter in the Age of Titans. The sauropods have arrived, and they are not going anywhere for a very, very long time. The forest thins as you climb higher, the air lighter, scented with resin and the sharp tang of wet stone. Up here, above the tree canopy, you finally catch your breath, and your first panoramic glimpse of the Jurassic world in full bloom. Rolling plains stretch out beneath you, stitched together with braided rivers and wide, fern-covered floodplains. Herds move in gentle arcs across the landscape, swaying like waves. But you're not alone up here on this rocky overlook. A shadow glides overhead, broad wings, leathery and quiet. You duck instinctively, but the pterosaur isn't here for you. It's hunting smaller prey, maybe an early mammal, maybe something even stranger. The sky, like the land, has its own drama, but your eyes are drawn downward to the basin far below where true Jurassic jungle chaos unfolds. Welcome to the Morrison Formation. You make your way down the slope as the humidity ramps up. The ground softens, plant life thickens, and the soundtrack shifts from distant thunder to the constant background hum of insects and screeching herbivores. Here, in what is now Western North America, lies one of the richest fossil beds of the late Jurassic. You're walking across history's backstage, where all the biggest stars hung out before the Cretaceous stole the spotlight. To your left, a pair of Stegosaurus are doing what they do best, lumbering with confidence and looking like they were designed by a distracted 5-year-old. Their plates catch the sun like a row of misplaced sails, and that tail, it's armed with 4 long spikes, known affectionately in paleontology circles as the thagomizer, a term jokingly coined by a cartoonist that somehow stuck. One of the rare moments where science looked at humor and said, "Yes, that'll do nicely." The stegosaurs trudge past you, barely acknowledging your presence, their heads weirdly small for such massive bodies. You wonder, as many have, how such an armored creature could thrive with a brain the size of a walnut. Historians still argue whether those plates were for defense, thermoregulation, or just a very bold fashion statement. You suspect it was all 3, or maybe none. Evolution doesn't explain itself, it just moves on. You step over a stream as the sound of bellowing grows louder. Across the clearing, a herd of Camarasaurus is gathered around a shallow watering hole, dipping their thick necks like gentle cranes. These sauropods are more compact than the long, snake-like Diplodocus types, but they're no less impressive. Their teeth are spoon-shaped, perfect for scooping up large mouthfuls of leaves and not doing much else. Chewing isn't their forte. Swallow first, ferment later. That's the sauropod way. You inch closer and notice a juvenile resting near its mother's flank, its breathing slow and rhythmic. In this relatively peaceful pocket of Jurassic jungle, you sense something rare: stability. For all its thunder and fangs, the Morrison ecosystem is remarkably balanced. Apex predators stalk the edges. Mid-sized herbivores fill in the gaps. Smaller creatures thrive in the undergrowth, dodging feet the size of patio furniture. And speaking of predators, your peace doesn't last long. A sharp, chattering cry cuts through the trees. The Camarasaurus herd tenses. You spin just in time to catch sight of an Allosaurus stepping into the clearing, head low, eyes locked. It's not the biggest predator ever, but here it's top of the food chain. Long arms with 3-fingered hands flex as it moves, each footstep deliberate. Its skull is narrow, filled with serrated teeth like steak knives, and its gaze scans the herd for weakness. It's not looking to fight, it's looking to win. And it's not alone. Another Allosaurus emerges from the opposite side, and now the herd begins to shuffle. There's evidence these predators may have hunted in groups, or at least tolerated each other long enough to bring down big prey. Historians still argue whether Allosaurus was a true pack hunter or just an opportunist who showed up late to every kill. But right now, it doesn't matter. Two predators, one herd. You back up slowly and try not to breathe too loudly. Suddenly, a cry goes up. A juvenile Camarasaurus has strayed too far from the adults. The predators spring. It's not a sprint so much as a controlled dive, legs pounding, tails swinging for balance. The chase erupts in a blur of dust and panic trumpeting. You duck behind a log just in time to avoid a swishing tail and the sharp tang of crushed foliage. The air fills with sound, fear, hunger, desperation. The Camarasaurus adult rears up, slamming its front feet into the ground with a shockwave that rattles your ribs. The predators hesitate just long enough for the calf to scramble back. No blood today, just a warning. The allosaurs circle once, twice, then melt into the forest. The herd exhales as one. You do too. When the noise dies down, you realize how much of the Jurassic drama plays out in tense silence. It's not all roars and chaos. It's eyes in the bushes, herds constantly on edge, predators measuring distance, wind, and weakness. Even the top carnivores don't waste energy unless the odds are good. When you're this big, mistakes are expensive. A rustle to your right draws your attention to something smaller, more graceful. Ornitholists, a compact, curious theropod with a delicate build and the perpetual expression of a creature that's always just heard a strange noise. It picks its way through the underbrush, looking for eggs, insects, maybe a stray lizard. It moves like it's late for something important, then freezes when it sees you. A moment passes. Then it chirps, a high, almost musical sound, and vanishes back into the ferns. You lie back on a slope of soft moss and close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the afternoon settle over you. The scent of damp earth, conifer sap, and whatever sauropods leave behind after lunch fills the air. You're surrounded by creatures that defy logic and gravity, bodies shaped by millions of years of experimentation. Some of them won't make it past this period. Others will evolve into forms so unrecognizable that you'll need a museum diagram to track the changes. But for now, they're here, living, breathing, existing in a world both savage and slow. The Jurassic is lush, complex, and humming with energy. It's not just about who's the biggest or who has the sharpest claws. It's about balance, timing, and an entire cast of creatures playing roles no one fully understands. And in this ancient jungle, where titans walk and predators wait, you realize something quietly profound. Nobody's really in charge. You feel the chill first, not from the air, which is still heavy with humidity and insect buzz, but from the way the forest goes quiet. Like someone hit mute on a world that never stops shouting. You pause mid-step, the moss beneath your feet damp and springy, and wait. Something is watching, or more accurately, hunting. You're deep in the Jurassic now, and the rules are different. The giants may own the space, but the real power lies with those learning how to outthink their meals. From the shadows, it emerges, a megalosaurus, tall, lean, and surprisingly graceful. There's nothing theatrical about its movement, just quiet precision. This isn't your movie monster kind of predator. It's a calculated biomechanical masterpiece. Each step lands like punctuation. The skull is long and narrow, serrated teeth just visible beneath curled lips. And those arms, longer than you expect. Still clawed, still functional. It looks like a creature midway through an upgrade. You press back against the trunk of a prehistoric cycad as it passes. Its nostrils flare, just a breath of curiosity, but then it's off again, muscles twitching beneath scaly skin that shimmers slightly with each movement. There's an elegance here that the lumbering herbivores can't match. Sauropods are tanks. Megalosaurus is a guided missile. And this, you realize, is where the super predators begin to show their cards. The Jurassic is an evolutionary arms race, and the predators are no longer content with simple brute force. They're becoming specialized, agile, cunning. You watch a ceratosaurus in the distance sniffing at the air, its distinctive horn catching the light like a warning flag. It's smaller than its rivals, but just as deadly. And faster. This one doesn't charge head-on. It circles, waits, tests the edges. Historians still argue whether Ceratosaurus and Allosaurus ever truly competed, or if they occupied different ecological roles, one chasing prey in denser vegetation, the other dominating open plains. But you suspect there's overlap. The kill zones are shifting, and being unique might be the only way to keep eating. You pass through a low ravine, where the skeletal remains of something massive lie partially buried in mud. The vertebrae stretch out like a fossilized serpent, half excavated by time and rain. A predator did this. You crouch beside it, brushing away flakes of sediment, and find deep gouges along the ribs, bite marks, not from scavenging but from a kill. Here's a quirky twist. Paleontologists once thought Megalosaurus was a lumbering lizard that dragged its tail on the ground like a reluctant kite. In fact, it holds a special place in dino history. It was the first dinosaur ever formally named, all the way back in 1824. Of course, early reconstructions were hilariously wrong. One 19th century model had it propped up like a bear on its hind legs, looking like it needed a monocle and a pipe. But over time, the fossils spoke louder. They revealed a predator built for pursuit, with sharp claws, balanced posture, and a terrifying bite force. And speaking of bite force, Tetanuri, the group that includes most of the big theropods, is now taking center stage. Their name literally means stiff tails, and you can see why. These tails act like rudders, counterbalancing their heads during high-speed movement. It's not just an upgrade, it's a revolution in design. Suddenly, a predator doesn't just run, it steers. You follow a narrow trail of footprints, three-toed, deep, and spaced evenly. The stride is long, suggesting a confident, controlled pace. No panic, no hesitation. You imagine the animal that left them, a Torvosaurus maybe, cutting through the trees with a nose tuned to blood. Somewhere nearby, a dry rustling hints at something dying, and the forest tilts into silence again. Predators of this age are no longer just survivors. They are strategists, they ambush, they coordinate. They develop traits that seem uncannily modern: binocular vision, enhanced olfactory bulbs, clawed grasping hands. You peek around a rock and catch sight of a young Allosaurus practicing on a carcass, tearing strips of flesh with unsettling efficiency. It doesn't eat all of it, just the good parts. The rest, left for the scavengers, wasteful, maybe, but also efficient. You don't need to chew bones when you're already planning the next kill. You step carefully around a cluster of dead logs and spot a pair of Dilophosaurus, smaller, more delicate predators with those iconic twin crests. They're picking at a fallen Dryosaurus, chirping quietly to each other like gossiping raptors. It's eerie how social they seem. Their movements are synchronized, cautious but comfortable. Historians still debate whether such theropods displayed cooperative behavior or were simply taking turns at the buffet. Either way, this is more than instinct. It feels rehearsed. A breeze carries the scent of decay and pine needles. You find a high ridge and watch from a safe distance as a larger theropod approaches the site, possibly Saurophaganax, a contender for the largest predator of the Morrison Formation. It moves slowly, not from age but from sheer mass. Its head alone could probably knock over a compact car. Every creature nearby scatters, including the smaller predators. This isn't about speed, it's about authority. Here, what evolution has figured out by this point, there's more than one way to be terrifying. You can be fast and smart. You can be big and brutal. Or if you're lucky, you can be both. The Jurassic theropods aren't cookie-cutter carnivores. They're prototypes for specialization. Some lose unnecessary digits. Others develop slicing claws. Even their teeth tell stories. Some are serrated for shearing, others conical for gripping. It's a buffet of murder tools. You descend into a shaded glade, where a pack of smaller coeluroid types dash through the ferns like wind-blown leaves. These guys are nimble, bird-like, and just starting to look suspiciously like future avians. They chirp, they hop, they don't stay still. And they're not alone in this evolutionary overlap. Feathers, or at least fuzzy proto-feathers, are starting to appear in scattered lineages. They're not flying yet, but they're flirting with the idea. You take a deep breath, the forest thick with tension and blooming spores. This isn't a world of singular dominance. It's a buffet of predator types, each carving out a path through time. Their prey gets smarter. Their bodies get leaner. The ecosystem reshuffles again and again, and each time the predators meet the challenge with a new blueprint. You hear another distant roar. It's not anger, it's just presence. These creatures don't need to fight every moment to stay on top. They've already learned the better trick, how to build bodies that work better than the ones before. And the predators of this Jurassic jungle are getting frighteningly good at it. You stand very still, listening as the chirps fade and the shadows shift back into place. Somewhere out there, something is hunting again, and something else is already evolving to outhunt it. The morning mist settles like gauze across the lowland marsh, the trees standing in dreamy stillness as if afraid to stir the silence. You walk carefully, your footsteps muffled in the spongy ground. Then, like a ripple breaking glass, you hear it, a high-pitched trill, sharp and almost bird-like. You freeze. There it is again, followed by a rustling in the underbrush. Not the crashing chaos of a predator or the plodding rhythm of a sauropod. This is lighter, quicker, purposeful. You turn your head just in time to catch a flash of color. Bright orange along the arm, stripes on the tail, and something else, feathers. Yes, actual proto-feathers, quill-like and scruffy, like a feather duster that's been dragged through a swamp. The creature pauses on a fallen log, head cocked at an angle, yellow eyes glinting in the gloom. Congratulations. You've just locked eyes with one of evolution's most chaotic brainstorms, probably a member of the Compsognathidie, or something similarly pint-sized and unsettling. It darts away before you can get a good look, but it leaves behind questions that have plagued paleontologists for decades. Feathers, here, now. The Jurassic is starting to flirt with fluff. You wade into a clearing where the sunlight slants down through mist, lighting up a small group of feathery theropods picking their way through undergrowth. They're not flying, they don't even look like they're trying to. Their feathers are sparse, filamentous, patchy in places, not the aerodynamic perfection we associate with birds, but more like insulation. You watch one shake out its plumage, puffing up like an irritated chicken, and suddenly you can almost see the leap, not to flight, but to warmth. Here, where the real story begins. Feathers didn't start as flight tools. Historians still argue whether their earliest function was insulation, camouflage, or showboating. But one thing is clear, they showed up before flight did, long before. And now, these weird little hunters are wearing evolution's most confusing prototype on their sleeves, literally. You crouch behind a log, observing a pair of small raptor-like creatures, possibly early Maniraptorans, engaged in a ritual that looks suspiciously like courtship. One flares its proto-feathers in a clumsy dance, half spin, half hop. The other seems unimpressed and darts off into the foliage. Even back here, millions of years before mating apps, rejection still stings. But it makes sense. If you can't overpower predators or outcompete the giants, you adapt another way through agility, through stealth, and increasingly through smarts. Brain-to-body ratios are starting to climb. You can practically feel the synapses firing faster in these feathered theropods. They pause before they pounce. They cooperate. They remember. You move deeper into the thicket and the ecosystem tightens around you. Branches lower, vegetation denser, and the creatures more. nuanced. A small oviraptor-like animal darts between tree trunks, snatching what looks like a clutch of eggs, its own. Someone else's. You can't tell. But there's a pause in its movement, a quick look around. Caution, calculation, that's new. Nearby, you find a shallow depression in the soil, a nest. Inside are a half-dozen eggs, speckled and faintly striped. And above them, feathers, not shed or fallen, but deliberately placed, or rather incubated. There's evidence growing, still debated, that some theropods sat on their nests, brooded like birds, protected their young before they even hatched. The first real signs of parental investment. In a world ruled by tooth and claw, that's a radical move. You sit by the base of a conifer tree, watching as a troop of small, fuzzy dinosaurs scurry through the undergrowth, their movements coordinated like a flock of sparrows. They chirp and click, communicating in subtle tones. It's eerie, this avian vibe in a world still dominated by creatures with jaws strong enough to bite through bone. Here's a quirky historical footnote. For a long time, the idea of feathered dinosaurs was considered laughable. Museums favored the image of scaly monsters, sharp and dry and lizard-like. But then came the discoveries from Liaoning, China, remarkably well-preserved fossils that showed feathers in exquisite detail. Not just one or two species. A whole cast of raptors, Eoraptorosaurs, and tiny weirdos that looked like someone glued feathers to a velociraptor and dared it to be adorable. And that changed everything. Now the forest around you feels like a revelation. The dinosaurs aren't just warm-blooded, they're warm-hearted in a way. At least some of them. You see smaller ones guarding their young, alert to every rustle. The larger ones, like a synraptor you glimpse in the distance, still rule with size, but they're losing ground to these agile, feathery upstarts. Speed and intelligence are beginning to matter more than bulk. Historians still argue whether feathers gave these theropods a survival edge beyond insulation. Some suggest feathers helped with maneuverability, adding drag, improving stability during jumps or runs. Others believe visual signaling played a role. You're inclined to agree. The way these creatures flash their plumage in short bursts, threat displays, warnings, mating dances, it's all very calculated. There's communication happening here. And that, more than teeth or claws, is the sign of a coming shift. You cross a narrow stream and find another group, slightly larger. They're clustered around a kill, nothing dramatic, just a small lizard-like creature now missing its insides. But the way they take turns, the way they chirp and posture and occasionally snap without real aggression, it feels familiar. Pack dynamics, shared roles. Not quite a democracy, but definitely not anarchy. You step back and let the forest absorb you again. A canopy of ferns rustles in the breeze, and high above, something glides. Maybe a primitive pterosaur, or maybe just a feathered theropod testing gravity in short bounds. Either way, the air feels alive with possibility. And beneath it all, the feathered ones keep moving, quick, clever, and just strange enough to survive. They don't know it yet, of course, but they're laying down the blueprint for something bigger than themselves. Flight, eventually. But even before that, warmth, memory, strategy. The building blocks of an entirely new way to live. You lean back, eyes half closed, listening to the soft clicks and trills echo through the trees. There's a different kind of energy here, lighter, more alert. Less brute force, more clever footwork. Evolution isn't just shaping bodies anymore. It's sculpting behaviors. And somewhere in this forest full of fluff, claws, and cautious glances, you start to hear the faintest whispers of something not yet named. Bird song. The morning breaks soft and golden over a wide, open plain. The kind that stretches so far it feels like the land forgets where it ends. You step into the light and nearly trip over a discarded frond the size of a mattress. Welcome to the Cretaceous buffet, where evolution, having already gone through its moody experimental phase, is now all in on extravagance. Everything here seems either spikier, faster, more colorful, or very, very strange. And at the center of this ecological variety show, the ornithischians, those so-called bird-hipped dinosaurs that couldn't be more proudly weird. You glance up just in time to see a pair of hadrosaurs, duck-billed, lanky, and perpetually chewing, waddle across the plain with the dignity of cows that believe they're very important. These are likely Edmontosaurus or something close, depending on your coordinates. Their bills are broad, ridged, ideal for grinding vegetation into unrecognizable mush, and they're followed by a trail of squeaky juveniles that dart back and forth like kids at a buffet line. It's hard not to smile. These guys may be the most relatable dinosaurs you've seen yet. Hadrosaurs don't have claws, horns, or armor, but don't let their floppy faces fool you. These were some of the most successful herbivores of the Cretaceous, found all over what's now North America, Asia, and even Antarctica. Yep, that's your quirky fact for the day, hadrosaurs in Antarctica. Back then, it was still part of a warmer world, and these adaptable munchers weren't about to let a little latitude stop them from colonizing every plant buffet they could find. You step aside as one adult flares its elaborate head crest, probably a Corythosaurus, with a helmet-like structure that makes it look like it just wandered in from a Roman gladiator match. Theories abound about what these crests were for. Historians still argue whether they were sound resonators for bellowing, sexual display tools, or just a flamboyant way of saying, "I am much cooler than the other hadrosaurs." The one in front of you lets out a low honk that rattles your sternum and sends a flock of smaller dinos scattering into the brush. And those smaller ones, ornithischian misfits, every one of them. You follow a group of Parksosaurus, compact, bird-like, quick on their feet. They dart through low brush with alert eyes and stiff tails, their beaks snapping at seed ferns. These little guys aren't flashy, but they're fast, and they seem to operate on pure caffeine. Some paleontologists think these kinds of dinosaurs relied on herds and speed to avoid being part of the local lunch menu. You make your way toward a more wooded area and nearly walk right into the business end of a Pachycephalosaurus skull. It freezes. You freeze. You both consider your life choices. Its head, dome-shaped, nearly solid bone, looks like someone started building a helmet and forgot to stop. There's a long-standing debate about whether these dinosaurs actually used their heads for butting contests like rams, or if it's more likely they performed subtle social displays, head tilts and side shoves, to avoid the full contact drama. You suspect they still knocked a few skulls around anyway. The one before you gives a polite snort and stomps off, its absurdly thick cranium bobbing with each step. And here's the real joy of this era. Everything is getting strangely ornate. You press deeper into the underbrush and emerge into a sunlit clearing where the ground shakes with every step of a triceratops. 3 horns, massive frill, skin like wrinkled bark. It's the medieval warhorse of dinosaurs. It looks at you sideways, the way a rhino might glance at an out-of-place bird. You stand very still. Its horns twitch. Then it goes back to chewing, tearing up foliage with a beak so powerful it could probably cut down your entire grocery list in one bite. The frill is not just for show, or maybe it is. Historians still argue whether it served mainly as defense, a display structure for attracting mates, or a social identifier within herds. The sheer variation among ceratopsians, some with short frills, some with elaborate spikes, suggests it may have done all of the above, depending on who you asked and how closely you stared. You move slowly along the forest's edge, where the lesser-known relatives of the giants roam. A couple of protoceratops dig at the base of a shrub with stubby beaks, their compact frills twitching like sensitive radar dishes. They're smaller than triceratops, sure, but they're part of the same bizarre family, and one of them may have inspired the whole griffin myth. thanks to fossils found alongside ancient trade routes. That's your historical footnote for the hour. Sometimes, a beaked skeleton with a frill and claws looks a lot like a mythical creature if you've never seen a dinosaur before. But the kings of strange aren't done with you yet. You hear a low grunt, almost a burp, and out of the foliage shuffles an ankylosaurus, the tank of the dinosaur world. Low-slung, heavily armored tail ending in a literal club. You wonder how it even breathes under all that weight. Its back is covered in osteoderms, bony plates embedded in thick skin, and it moves like a scaled Roomba on a mission. You don't want to get in its way. That tail club isn't just for decoration. A solid swing from that thing could break a femur, or a car, or your quiet afternoon. And here's the thing, Ankylosaurus doesn't have to be fast. It doesn't have to be smart. It just has to be indestructible. That's its entire business model. If a tyrannosaur gets too cocky, it's getting walloped. You observe one casually swatting a curious dromaeosaurus away from its territory. No drama, just a thud and a yelp and a clear reminder that some herbivores are not to be messed with. As you rest in the shade of a tall conifer, listening to the snorts and honks of grazing herds, you realize just how diverse the ornithischians have become. They're no longer awkward side characters in the great dinosaur narrative. They've carved out their own plotline, adaptable, resilient, increasingly social, and often ludicrously ornate. Beaks, spikes, crests, frills, clubs. If evolution offered a feature, someone in this group took it. You close your eyes for a moment, the afternoon heat making everything feel soft around the edges. A faint breeze carries the scent of crushed pine and dino sweat. Somewhere in the distance, a hadrosaur toots mournfully, followed by the bash of armored tail against predator shin. And you think, not for the first time, that maybe weird one. The water laps gently at the edges of the island, soft and rhythmic like the slow breathing of something enormous sleeping just beneath the waves. You squint across the inlet, watching the tree line sway in the late afternoon breeze, and then turn to look behind you, because this isn't just any patch of land. This is an island where evolution plays by different rules. Welcome to the Cretaceous archipelago, where dinosaurs get weird fast, and every species that drifts ashore decides to reinvent itself entirely. You've landed in what was once a fragment of Europe, long before the continent was the coherent landmass we know now. Back then, it was a scattered mess of islands, reefs, and volcanic blips poking above shallow seas. And on one of these ancient islands, a Magurosaurus, a sauropod, yes, but one that could comfortably share a sidewalk with you, plods through dense forest, tail swaying and legs lifting with theatrical effort. It's tiny, no bigger than a cow. You stare at it and blink twice. Island dwarfism, it's real, and it's not just a party trick. On islands, resources are scarce, food is limited, predators are few or non-existent. So when a large species finds itself isolated, it often shrinks over generations. Why burn extra calories when you can fit into the local economy by being 70% smaller and just as effective? That's the rule book on these islands. Smaller, stranger, more specialized. You creep forward and crouch behind a log, watching a group of dwarf nodosaurs waddle past like armored dogs. Their plates glint in the sunlight, and their tails twitch in half-hearted warning. You realize with a pang that you're watching species that may only exist here. Mainland relatives wouldn't recognize them. And if the sea levels ever shift again, well, they'll either vanish or grow big again. Life, as always, is weirdly elastic. But not everything shrinks. From the canopy above, a Hatzegopteryx swoops low, casting a long, slow-moving shadow that silences the forest. This pterosaur is massive, wingspan the size of a small aircraft, a beak like a meat-slicing guillotine, and an unsettling sense of entitlement. It's not a dinosaur, but it doesn't care what label you use. On this island, it's the apex predator. And yes, You heard that right. A flying reptile is top of the food chain. Historians still argue whether Hatzegopteryx hunted live prey or scavenged, but either way, it likely ate smaller dinosaurs. You spot a scuttling Zalmox's dart for cover, a small, beaked herbivore that looks like someone crossed a kangaroo with a parrot and hit the miniature button. It nearly collides with your foot before vanishing into the ferns. The fear is real. The sky has teeth. You move along the island's ridge, careful to step lightly. The ground here is soft, the forest thick and visibility low. Evolution on islands doesn't just change size, it plays with behavior, locomotion, even bone density. You pass a clearing and spot what looks like a dwarf theropod balor, perhaps packing slowly around a mossy stump. It's small, yes, but heavily built, with double sickle claws on each foot. It looks like a velociraptor crossed with a gym rat. Compact, stocky, powerful. It's not just surviving here, it's thriving. And that's your quirky twist. On this island, predators didn't shrink. They got denser, meaner, more robust. Because when the herbivores got smaller and slower, the predators didn't need to chase. They needed to pounce and overpower in one burst. It's like watching evolution strip away the fat and focus on maximum efficiency. One kill. No wasted movement. You lean back against a tree trunk and notice the calls in the forest. They're different. Less like the booming bellows of continental sauropods or the honking cacophony of hadrosaur herds. These calls are higher pitched, clipped, even musical. There's a hypothesis, still debated, that island animals tend to develop unique vocalizations, especially in more avian-adjacent groups. With fewer species competing for space and sound, communication gets more complex, even refined. As the light shifts, you cross over to another island. This time a volcanic atoll, black stone rising out of the water like the spine of some ancient creature. And there, in the middle of the clearing, a group of the Dinosaurus relatives are doing something that should not be possible. They're foraging peacefully. Tall, bizarre, with potbellies and scythe-like claws over 3 feet long, these creatures look like they got lost on their way to a completely different ecosystem. Their feathers shimmer faintly in the dying light, and their snouts root through ferns like giant feathered anteaters. You blink. Again. The Dinosaurs, in general, are a mystery. Meat-eating ancestors turned herbivores with claws sharp enough to eviscerate a tractor. They look dangerous but spend most of their time eating salads. Historians still argue whether those claws were defensive or for pulling down high vegetation. But out here, on this tiny fragment of Earth, they seem content. Slower. Quieter. There's no rush to evolve fast when your nearest threat has wings and mostly eats bobbies. You watch a younger one flick a beetle off its claw with the air of someone disgusted by manual labor. It pecks idly at the bark of a tree, then snorts and settles into a crouch. Even the weirdos out here are relaxed. And here's what's becoming clear as the moon rises and casts silver light over the archipelago. Islands compress everything. Time, pressure, space. 1,000,000 years on the mainland may produce a steady shift. But here, change happens fast. Isolation is a crucible. Sometimes things shrink. Sometimes they bulk up. Sometimes they mutate in ways no mainland cousin ever dreamed of. And you can't help but feel that these island dwellers, dwarfed, flighty, armored, feathered, or grotesquely clawed, are all part of a grand evolutionary experiment. Many of them will vanish, their fossils scattered in unlikely places, and paleontologists millions of years later will shake their heads and wonder, what on earth happened here? You'll know you were there. You saw it unfold. The lapping of the waves is steady now, the wind soft. You lie back against a bed of moss, feathers drifting from a distant branch above. Somewhere, a small predator calls out across the island, and the call is answered, not with fear but familiarity. Out here, survival isn't about brute strength or size. It's about fitting into the gaps. And sometimes, the smallest gaps leave room for the strangest dreams. The ground shakes in pulses, slow and deliberate, like the heartbeat of a planet that's just woken up angry. You're standing on what was once Laramidia, a narrow strip of land that existed during the late Cretaceous, separated from the rest of North America by a shallow inland sea. And it's not just the geology that's intense out here, it's the company. Because right now, brushing through the forest edge like a tank that's just had enough of everyone's nonsense, comes Tyrannosaurus rex. It's larger than you imagined. Everyone says that, but still, this thing defies expectation. Eyes like searchlights, legs like bridge pillars, a head the size of a hot tub with teeth shaped for crushing, not slicing. It doesn't so much walk as it moves forward through inevitability. There's nothing rushed about it, no panic. It knows exactly where it stands in the food chain, which is above everyone else. You back into a thicket, heart racing, breath shallow. The beast snorts, pauses, then lumbers on, tail swinging wide, crushing a sapling like it's a decorative toothpick. You can feel the echo of its footfalls in your chest, like bass at a concert. It's not hunting right now, just moving through its territory. But even that is enough to send smaller dinosaurs scattering like someone flipped the panic switch. A group of ankylosaurs rumbles past, armor clanking, tails raised like medieval flails. They aren't running, they don't have to. They're tanks. But even tanks don't like to test their luck when T-Rex is around. One of them turns its head slightly as it passes you, as if to say, "I'm not afraid, but I am very busy being somewhere else." But here's the thing. The story isn't just about T-Rex. It's about the arms race that made T-Rex necessary. Because for every top predator, there has to be prey smart, armored, or dangerous enough to justify it. You hear a bellow across the plain. Not a roar, but a low, resonant blast, deep and guttural, Triceratops, and not just one. A whole herd moving in a slow, coordinated wave across the landscape. Their horns are formidable, sure, but it's the frill that grabs your attention. Massive, colorful, ringed with keratin and maybe even soft tissue that blushed in the right light. You can imagine one lowering its head and charging. And honestly, you wouldn't want to be anything standing in the way. Historians still argue whether T-Rex regularly took down adult Triceratops, or mainly preyed on the young or sick. Some fossilized Triceratops skulls show healed puncture wounds that match T-Rex teeth, evidence of either failed attacks or later infections. Either way, these two were clearly locked in a perpetual game of biological chess, each adapting to beat the other. You wonder what it must have felt like to live in a time where death could appear in 3 perfectly symmetrical horns, or in jaws designed to pulverize bone. And it's not just Triceratops keeping the carnivores on their toes. You shift your gaze to the forest edge, where a family of Edmontonia lumbers through the ferns. These nodosaurids are like lowriders dipped in tank armor. No tail club like the ankylosaurs, but they don't need one. Their bodies are covered in bony plates and spikes, and even their eyelids are armored. One lowers its head and grunts as a Dromaeosaurus, a feathery, foot-long bundle of bravado, creeps too close and gets a tail slap for its trouble. The Dromaeosaurus squeaks indignantly and retreats, presumably to post about it on prehistoric social media. You crouch low, watching it skulk away. These raptors aren't the huge cinematic nightmares of modern film. They're small, fast, and way more bird-like than most people imagine. Feathers, absolutely. Sharp claws, of course. Giant man-sized horror beasts, not really. But what they lack in bulk, they make up for in agility and attitude. And then through a break in the trees, you spot the T-Rex again. It's not alone this time. A second one, smaller, possibly younger, paces alongside it. They don't interact much, but their parallel paths suggest a shared purpose. Some paleontologists have proposed that T-Rex may have been more social than once believed. Perhaps family groups or loose hunting associations existed, especially among younger individuals. Historians still argue whether these apex predators were lone brutes or surprisingly cooperative. Fossil sites showing multiple individuals together hint at a more complex story than just solitary giants stomping through the woods. You watch as the larger of the two leans down and snatches something from the undergrowth, a dead hadrosaur already half decayed. It's scavenging. Another myth bites the dust. For decades, people imagined T-Rex only as a hunter, but the truth is messier. It probably hunted and scavenged. If there's free food lying around, even the king isn't above leftovers. And that brings you to another remarkable feature of T-Rex. Its teeth weren't just sharp. They were wide, banana-sized, and serrated on both sides, ideal for crunching through bone. Paired with a bite force that could make a car cry, those teeth mean business. Bite marks found on fossils show evidence that T-Rex could crack through rib cages and skulls like a nutcracker with anger issues. You sit under a sprawling conifer as the afternoon heat ripples across the plain, the scent of crushed vegetation and animal musk thick in the air. The Triceratops herd passes at a distance, wary but calm. A juvenile strays briefly toward a group of pachycephalosaurs, who scatter like bowling pins before regrouping and collectively pretending it never happened. You can't help but notice something. Everything in this ecosystem looks built for confrontation. Armor, horns, clubs, powerful jaws. It's like every species here graduated from a school of evolutionary warfare. And yet they coexist. Predators pick their battles. Herbivores travel in herds. There's tension, yes, but also a strange balance. You glance back one last time as the sun begins to dip. The T-Rex stands silhouetted against the orange horizon, massive and still. It surveys its kingdom, a world of horns, armor, speed, and strategy. A world built on survival, sure, but also on escalation. Each generation pushing harder, growing larger, hitting faster. And then it turns and disappears into the forest, tail swaying like a pendulum, counting down the seconds to something no one can stop. The air here tastes different. It's thick with pollen, sweet and oddly smoky, like someone set fire to a botanical garden and then tried to bottle the scent. You step into a clearing where flowering plants, yes, actual flowers, have taken over. Big waxy blooms, strange curling petals, bursts of color that feel slightly out of place in a world still filled with toothy thunder lizards. You bend to sniff one cautiously. It smells like rotting fruit and cinnamon. You're not sure whether to be delighted or deeply concerned. Welcome to the late Cretaceous, where everything is evolving toward complexity and fragility. The land itself looks deceptively peaceful. Wide floodplains, dense forests, lush coastal deltas humming with insects and birdsong. Dinosaurs still rule here, but they've become oddly refined. No longer just massive tanks and predators with the emotional range of a paper shredder. Now you see specialists, mimics, social creatures, and more than a few that look like they're auditioning for a role in a surrealist ballet. A group of Mesozoic moves along the riverbank, the adults nudging their young ahead with soft honks. The bobbies, small and still a bit fuzzy, chirp back in what almost sounds like a language. This is one of the first dinosaurs linked to strong parental care, a dino that literally translates to good mother lizard. Fossilized nests show adults returning again and again, bringing food, protecting the young, maybe even teaching them how to survive. It's tender, domestic, and quietly revolutionary. You walk alongside them at a distance, marveling at how far things have come from the days of Coelophysis snapping blindly in the underbrush. Now you're looking at real family units, communities. The dynamics are deeper than just predator versus prey. There's nuance. There's intention. But beneath that, something darker simmers. You notice the plants have changed. Ferns still exist, but flowering plants, angiosperms, have exploded in diversity. They're fast-growing, aggressive, and rapidly reshaping ecosystems. Grasses, too, are beginning to spread, especially in more open environments. Small herbivores nibble them down to stubble, and in return, the plants grow back faster. A low-level evolutionary arms race between jaws and roots. You kneel and run your hand across the short grass, knowing that soon, some little ancestor of a goat will take over this buffet. Up in the trees, birds call to one another. Not proto-birds, not maybe sorta feathered dinosaurs. Real, flapping, tree-perching birds with hollow bones and flight feathers and the cocky attitude of creatures that know they're going to survive the apocalypse. They flit overhead, and you feel like you're walking through the prequel to your own backyard. But not everyone is adapting so easily. You find a shallow lake ringed with mud and dragonflies. At its edge, a half-buried skeleton lies sun-bleached and picked clean. It's large, likely a Saurolophus or another crested hadrosaur. The crest is still intact, arching back like a hollowed-out fin. Scientists believe these crests may have been used to make sounds, long, low bellows like a foghorn across the marsh. The idea that dinosaurs sounded as strange as they looked is both thrilling and vaguely horrifying. You trace the ribcage with your eyes and notice the uneven cracks in the bones. Not predator bites, not scavenger damage. This looks like stress, internal, maybe even illness. You've already heard the whispers in the wind, something's off in this world, and it's not just the smell of flowers. Historians still argue whether dinosaur populations were already declining by the end of the Cretaceous. Some fossil records suggest dwindling diversity in certain regions, especially among larger herbivores. Others point to localized climate shifts, new diseases, even volcanic activity starting to creep back into the geological record. But standing here, it feels like balance is harder to maintain. Specialization comes at a cost. Ecosystems are more intricate now. Impressive, yes, but also more fragile. A rustling draws your attention to the forest edge. A troodon watches you from behind a tree. It's smallish, maybe human-sized and alarmingly intelligent by dinosaur standards. Big eyes, agile limbs, a brain-to-body ratio that raises eyebrows in every museum it's displayed in. This one isn't just surviving, it's thinking. Some paleontologists even consider Troodon a contender for what could have evolved into a truly sentient species, had things gone differently. You stare at each other for a moment. No movement, just quiet recognition. Then it darts away, vanishing into the ferns. You step out into the open plain again, where a herd of Alamosaurus, yes, another sauropod, still enormous, still trudging, makes its way slowly across the horizon. The fact that these long-necked giants are still here, still holding their own among smarter, faster species, is kind of beautiful. Evolution doesn't always discard its old designs. Sometimes it just updates the software enough to keep them relevant. But even so, you can feel the tension building. The Cretaceous world feels more layered. Birds, mammals, flowering plants, insects, all rising. Dinosaurs still dominate the big spaces, but they no longer rule everything by default. Life is diversifying faster than ever before, and complexity, beautiful as it is, comes with a price. Here's your quirky bit. Some paleontologists have proposed that certain dinosaur species may have been experimenting with nocturnal lifestyles by this point. There's anatomical evidence, eye shape, inner ear structure, that suggests more animals were adapting to low-light environments. In short, the night was no longer just for hiding. It was becoming part of the plan. As you rest near a riverbank, watching a pair of armored theriophorans wade carefully through shallow water, you realize that the ecosystem is stretched tight like a drum. not just surviving but buzzing with life. Insects, fish, amphibians, birds, mammals, reptiles, all jostling in their respective niches. You marvel at how so much brilliance, so much evolutionary art can coexist. But something in the air feels temporary. Not doomed, not yet, but fragile. The sun begins to sink, painting the sky in gold and rust. The flowers glow in the fading light, bright and defiant. You hear a distant honk, a deep rumble of something massive moving through trees, and the fluting call of a bird echoing high above it all. And you wonder, not for the first time, if the age of dinosaurs is peaking right here, in this precise moment. Because everything that comes next will burn. You lie flat in the grass, eyes fixed skyward, watching a blur of wings dart across the fading blue. At first, you think it's just another bird, some scrappy early ancestor of a pigeon or maybe a seagull, judging by its smug body language. But when it banks hard, feathers flared and claws outstretched, you realize this one's not just flying. It's fighting, or at least doing aerial acrobatics with intent. That's not your standard bird, it's Archaeopteryx, or something alarmingly close to it. And just like that, you're watching one of the most contested fossils in history, flapping between worlds. Feathers check, wings check, teeth, claws, and a bony tail also check. It's not fully bird, but it's no longer fully dinosaur either. It's straddling the evolutionary fence like a gymnast on a balance beam, and somehow it doesn't fall. Historians still argue whether Archaeopteryx could truly fly or just glide in long, desperate bursts. Its shoulder joints and asymmetric feathers suggest powered flight was possible, but its relatively weak breastbone and clawed fingers point toward a more limited performance. Either way, it's not just airborne, it's airborne with attitude. It screeches once, twirls midair, and disappears into the canopy like it owns the place. You walk beneath the trees, watching shadows flicker across the forest floor. Something rustles overhead, a flash of color, then silence. Birds or near birds fill this ecosystem like leaves on a breeze. Some flit between branches, others nest in hollows. Some even seem to be mimicking insects, darting after buzzing prey with shocking precision. The line between dinosaur and bird has become soft, like a sketch drawn in charcoal and smudged at the edges. But flight didn't just appear. It crept in, slowly, quietly. Through generations of fluff, longer arms, lighter bones, and probably a lot of very awkward crash landings. Before these graceful flyers came their great-great-grandparents, Maniraptorans like Microraptor, with 4 wings and a confusing attitude. You spot one now, perched on a low branch. Its limbs are spread slightly like a hang glider waiting for launch. It stares at you with eyes that suggest mild annoyance and considerable intelligence. Then it hops, gone in a flutter of iridescent black feathers. You push through a thicket of shrubs and enter a glade where the real evolutionary tinkering is happening. A small group of anchiornis skitters across the leaf litter, chirping softly to each other. These guys are feathered from snout to tail, with fringed limbs and what looks suspiciously like aerodynamic contour feathers. They don't seem especially concerned by your presence. In fact, one tilts its head and squawks at you like it's judging your footwear. Here's your quirky twist of the day. Some of these feathered dinos likely had color vision. Fossilized melanosomes, the microscopic pigment structures in feathers, have been studied to reconstruct possible coloration. So that rusty red, the iridescent blue, even zebra-like stripes, not imagination, evidence. These creatures weren't just flying, they were fashionable. One anchiornis flares its wings and struts like it's modeling for a prehistoric runway show. You resist the urge to applaud. And then you see it, a nest, tucked safely behind a tree stump lined with plant fluff and shed feathers. Inside, several oval eggs rest undisturbed. One is cracked. A tiny claw protrudes, trembling. You hold your breath. The shell shifts, splits further, and a downy hatchling blinks up into the world. It's awkward, damp, slightly ridiculous, and utterly magical. And it's not alone. A shadow looms above the nest and you prepare to duck, but it's not a predator, it's a parent. The adult swoops in silently, lands near the nest with practiced ease, and lowers its beak to nudge the hatchling. Then, delicately, it begins to fluff the nest back into shape. Historians still argue whether brooding behavior emerged fully in non-avian dinosaurs or only once flight-capable birds evolved. But the fossil evidence leans toward a longer history of care, incubation, and social dynamics. You're seeing the roots of something familiar, home. You wander further through the woods and the soundscape changes. More trills, warbles, rapid-fire chirps. The forest pulses with small, winged lives. But amid the flitting grace, you spot another figure stepping slowly into the open. It's not airborne. It's grounded, feathered, and large, something like the Dinosaurs, all pot belly and piano wire claws. It stands silently near a patch of shrubs, raking the foliage with forelimbs that look designed to ruin someone's week. It's not graceful, but it's covered in downy plumage, a ground dweller wearing the outfit of a flyer. Not everything with feathers needs to fly. You duck as another burst of movement cuts overhead, a blur of dark wings and pale underbelly. Probably an enantiornithid, one of the many now extinct bird lineages that once ruled the skies. They had teeth, claws on their wings, and were capable of serious aerial finesse. You'd call them birds, but they didn't make it. Their line ended at the same moment the dinosaurs did. And no, that's not a spoiler, that's a countdown. But for now, you sit beneath a tree whose flowers are swarming with buzzing insects and preening protobirds. The air is busy, the leaves shimmer, the whole world hums with an energy that feels almost modern. And here's what you're beginning to understand. Birds didn't just appear when dinosaurs went extinct. They were already here, evolving, branching, adapting, shrinking and flapping and nesting and hopping. The line between bird and dinosaur isn't a break, it's a slope. Smooth, continuous. Feathers weren't a costume, they were a toolkit. You lie back, head against moss, and watch the sky again. Above you, a silhouette glides from one treetop to another, not flapping, soaring. And not as a novelty, this is what it does. You wonder how many clumsy leaps it took to get to that moment. How many times did a dinosaur fall out of a tree, shake itself off, and think, almost. Flight, after all, isn't a decision, it's an accumulation. The forest darkens slightly as clouds drift overhead. You hear a distant thunderclap, not a storm, not yet, but something ancient shifting underground. A prelude, a warning. The air smells of damp leaves and something else, the uncanny scent of everything on the edge of change. And as the birds above you call and soar and preen, you can't help but feel the irony. They're light, they're fast, they're everywhere, but they're also survivors, the last of their kind and the first of another. And in just a little while, they'll inherit the earth by default. Not through domination, but by simply being light enough to outlast the fire. The sky doesn't look right. It's not just the color, though that's changed too, a sickly bronze bleeding into rusted gold, but the texture, it's heavier somehow, oppressive. Clouds gather low and thick like bruises stitched across the heavens, and the wind carries with it a hum you can't quite place. Not thunder, not life, just pressure. A sense that the planet itself is holding its breath. You know what's coming. Everyone in this time knows it too, even if they don't understand why they're restless. You stand on a bluff overlooking the coastline. The sea is calm, too calm. Not glassy or serene, but motionless in the way an animal goes quiet before a quake. Below, herds of hadrosaurs move in slow, disjointed patterns. The young scamper still unaware. The adults, they're edgy, heads raised, ears twitching. No predators nearby, just instinct screaming from deep within their bones. Something is very, very wrong. And then it happens. A thin line of light appears on the horizon. Not the rising sun, it's the wrong angle, the wrong intensity. This is not dawn, this is impact. What strikes Earth is an asteroid 6 miles wide, moving faster than anything in your imagination. When it hits the Yucatan Peninsula, what will one day be Mexico, it releases more energy than 1 billion nuclear bombs. Not metaphorically, literally. The sky ignites, the ground liquefies, and you're far away, but it doesn't matter. Distance offers no comfort today. The shockwave reaches you in minutes. It doesn't feel like wind, it feels like a slap from the atmosphere itself. Trees bow backward. Smaller animals are thrown to the ground. The sky goes from bronze to white in a single, blinding instant. You drop, clutching the dirt, ears ringing. The world is on fire before the sound even arrives. Because yes, sound travels slower than light. So first you see it, then you feel it. Then at last you hear it, a roar that doesn't end. It comes from every direction, not as a noise, but as a force. The air burns. The trees combust without flames. Dinosaurs scream, those who can still make sound, and many simply collapse, stunned. The firestorm is global. Within hours, the soot reaches the upper atmosphere. Sunlight dims. Temperatures plummet. What doesn't burn begins to freeze. This is not extinction by violence alone. It's extinction by aftershock, a drawn-out death sentence of ash, acid rain, and darkness. You flee into the forest, ducking under branches that crackle from the heat still riding the wind. Around you, a pack of Troodon darts silently through the smoke. Their eyes, always bright, now seem haunted. Even they don't understand what's coming, but they run anyway. You follow because what else can you do? Later, the sky turns gray, not cloudy, but ash-thick and opaque. You can't tell where the sun is anymore. It's just a dull glow behind a world-sized curtain. The flowers wilt. The insects quiet. The songs of the birds, yes, the survivors, the flitters, the ones that learn to nest and hide and eat whatever is left, become the only sound. 3 days in, the fires stop. Not because they've run out of things to burn, but because there's nothing left to ignite. The carbon released from every forest now wraps the earth like a weighted blanket. Greenhouse gases climb, and then, paradoxically, temperatures fall. Without sunlight, plants die. Herbivores follow. Predators collapse next. It's a domino effect that topples an empire in slow motion. You return to the coast, stepping over the charred remains of things that once ruled. A juvenile ceratopsian, eyes closed as if still mid-dream. A pachycephalosaurus curled like a dog at rest. Even a raptor, feathers singed and bones twisted in an unnatural pose. The silence is endless. Not peace, just absence. And still a few persist. Small mammals emerge at dusk, snuffling at roots and gnawing on anything soft enough to chew. Birds, those feathered heirs to the kingdom, flit silently from branch to broken branch. Crocodilians lie motionless in murky water as they always have, waiting. Turtles retreat into shells. The resilient, the opportunistic, the overlooked, they endure. Here's your historical note for the night. Approximately 75% of all species on Earth vanish in this mass extinction. The Cretaceous, Paleogene event, as it will one day be called, wipes out every non-avian dinosaur, every pterosaur, most marine reptiles, and countless invertebrates. The age of dinosaurs ends not with a battle, but with a long, unraveling whisper. And yet, that's not the whole story. You find a quiet patch of forest still clinging to itself, half dead but trying. A bird perches on a low branch, feathers puffed against the cold, eyes alert. You recognize something in that gaze, tenacity. Fear, yes, but also adaptability. It flutters down, pecks at the bark, finds an insect, and flies off again. Life, even here after that, is not done. It never is. You lie back finally, breathing in the cooled air. The sky is darker now, permanently altered, but stars still shine. The moon still rises, and from the blackened earth, the seeds of the future push upward, silent and slow. The dinosaurs are gone, but the song remains. The days blur together now, if you can call them days. The sky still chokes on ash, and the light, what little filters through, feels stale and directionless, like sunlight passed through a dirty glass. You don't bother tracking time anymore. Time in this scorched and ashen world feels irrelevant. Everything that mattered, apex predators, endless herds, dramatic showdowns in the brush, has dissolved into soot. This is not extinction as a moment. It is extinction as a long, aching process. You move slowly through a flattened forest, your boots kicking through layers of charred fern and half-buried bones. Everything is soft underfoot, not mud, not soil, but a carpet of carbon once life, now crumbled into black dust. Trees stand only as stumps. The air smells perpetually like a smoldering campfire that no one dared put out. And somewhere in the haze, something coughs. Yes, coughs. You follow the sound and discover a hollow under a fallen log. Inside, a small mammal no bigger than a modern opossum stares at you with wide, terrified eyes. It's panting, dirty, but alive. Its fur is patchy, its ribs visible, but it's here, breathing, clinging. This is one of the few vertebrates that's figured out how to survive in this dead world. It looks like it should be prey, and it was for millions of years. But now, it might be the last hope with a pulse. You sit for a moment, both of you blinking through the ash. The animal trembles. Then it scurries back into the dark, disappearing into a tiny crevice where nothing larger could possibly follow. That's its trick. Small body, big nerves, no ego. And that's the pattern you begin to see everywhere. The giant things are gone. Not just the dinosaurs, but the marine reptiles, the flying beasts, the grand herbivores that made the ground shake with every step. Now the earth is quiet, and the ones who remain are those that can live in the margins. Burrowers, scavengers, generalists. No more tail clubs or giant crests or mating displays that could double as parade floats. Those extravagances don't work in a world where the sun hides. Even the oceans are dying in silence. You walk along a coastline where once there were Mosasaurus and plesiosaurs dominating the sea. Now the water is flat, lifeless, the color of dull slate. No breaching, no splashes, just the quiet slosh of waves against decaying driftwood. The plankton, the very foundation of the food chain, is in crisis. With sunlight blocked, it's like pulling the power plug from the bottom of a skyscraper. The ocean's ecosystem collapses from the bottom up. Dead fish litter the shoreline. A pterosaur skeleton lies twisted near the rocks, its paper-thin wing bones snapped like straws. No aerial acrobatics now. The wind, once filled with gliders and shriekers, is eerily still. You imagine how long they tried to hunt as their prey vanished, how long they circled before hunger grounded them. Here's your historical anchor. Most scientists estimate this extinction unfolded over weeks and months, but the global ecological fallout, that lasted for years, possibly even decades. Acid rain from the vaporized sulfur-rich rock poisoned freshwater sources. Plants died, soils eroded. Forests didn't just burn, they failed. Seeds couldn't germinate, roots couldn't hold. Entire biomes collapsed not in an explosion, but in a slow, humiliating fade. You stumble across what might have once been a dinosaur nest, just a hollow now. A few broken eggshell fragments, one half buried in soot. No parents, no young. The air is thick with silence, except for the occasional distant crack of a dead tree finally giving in to gravity. You find yourself talking aloud, not to anyone, just to fill the void. Where are they? You whisper, as if the dinosaurs are hiding behind the smoke, waiting for the signal to come back out. But they're not. You know this. You've seen too many skeletons, too many ghost prints in the ash, too many trails that simply end. Still, something lingers. A small bird flutters overhead, feathers scruffy, wings uneven but alive. It perches on a bare branch and sings a hoarse, barely their note. The sound is thin, wounded, but unmistakable. And that song, however pitiful, reminds you something still remembers how to hope. You walk for days through this haunted world. At night, the sky glows faintly, not from stars, but from the afterburn of an atmosphere trying to decide if it will recover. The moon sometimes peeks through, pale and unimpressed. You curl into the hollow of a rock, using your jacket for warmth, though the chill seeps in anyway. Each night, you listen for footsteps, for that deep, resonant call of a hadrosaur, the hoot of an owl-like raptor, the heavy breath of a T-Rex passing by. None come. But in their place, you hear other sounds, mammals scuttling, insects ticking softly in the grass, frogs croaking near a murky pond that still holds water. These are not the dominant creatures of the world. Not yet, but they are survivors. They eat what's left. They don't need much. And they keep going, not because they're strong, but because they're possible. Historians still argue how long it took for Earth to recover from this event. Some say 100,000 years, others longer. But the signs of life, true recovery, start in quiet places like this, pockets of green slowly returning, trees pushing up through ash, seeds defying odds. You spot one, a sapling bent from the weight of ash but still growing. You crouch beside it, fingers brushing its tiny leaves, and something uncoils in your chest. It's not over, not really. The dinosaurs, the non-avian ones, are gone. But life is still arrogant enough to try again. And here in the twilight of what was, just before what will be, you bear witness to the hinge point of history. An extinction, yes, but also an opportunity. The mammals will rise, the birds will spread, the forests will change, and the oceans will repopulate. And one day, in a few million years, something will dig up these bones, build a museum, and argue endlessly about feathers. But for now, you close your eyes, let the wind whisper over your skin, and sleep amid the quiet ruins. You wake to birdsong, not the echo of distant thunder lizards mimicking birds, not the scratchy half-squeaks of proto-flappers, but the real thing, clean, crisp, unrepentantly modern. A whistle, a chirp, a trilling cascade that feels like it's been rehearsed for millennia and is now ready for its proper debut. The sun breaks through thin clouds and scatters gold across the underbrush. You sit up slowly, half expecting ash and silence again. But no, the world is different now, scarred, yes, but not dead. This is the beginning of something new. A world where the survivors, quiet, unassuming, resourceful, have inherited the earth. You stroll into the clearing, boots brushing over a carpet of low ferns and sprouting angiosperms. Insects flit between early blossoms. You spot a bee, or something a lot like one, tumbling drunkenly from flower to flower, totally unbothered by your presence. The chaos of the impact is over. What remains now is recovery, and evolution wastes no time. A rustle draws your eyes to the thicket, and out waddles a small bird. Not quite a robin, not quite anything you recognize, but close enough that your brain does a double take. It pecks at the ground, tilts its head, and hops toward a nearby puddle for a sip. You crouch, heart hammering with quiet awe. That thing is a dinosaur, not just genetically. Literally. It carries every feathered ancestor in its DNA. That's the legacy of survival, streamlined, compact, adapted. Historians still argue which birds made it through the mass extinction and why. Size likely mattered. Smaller bodies required fewer calories. So did diet. Seed eaters and generalists had a distinct edge when the world's food web collapsed. Nesting behavior, too, may have helped. Those able to hide underground or in tight shelters likely had a better shot at enduring the endless winter. And then, of course, there's luck, the most unscientific but brutally honest survival trait. You follow a dirt path now, not a trail carved by dinosaurs, but one worn by smaller feet, birds, mammals, reptiles that never left. The mammals are the ones you notice most. They're everywhere, tiny, twitchy, and suspicious. One darts across your path, a didylphodon or something like it, mouth stuffed with moss. Another scuttles up a tree, vanishing into the canopy like a nervous whisper. These are no longer nighttime curiosities hiding from raptors. These are the future rulers of the planet. Rodent-sized for now, but evolution is about patience, not drama. They'll grow larger, smarter, stranger. In time, they'll walk on two legs, look at the stars, and name the dinosaurs they never met. But we're not there yet. You step over a log and spot a turtle basking in the sun. It watches you, entirely unimpressed, and you know why it never left. Turtles, crocodiles, amphibians, many of them survive the impact with minimal changes. Their slow metabolisms, aquatic lifestyles, and general disinterest in rapid evolution may have shielded them. They didn't adapt to the chaos, they outweighted it. There's something deeply humbling about that. You find a slow-moving stream, its surface broken by the occasional flick of a fish fin. Freshwater ecosystems bounce back quicker than most, shielded from the worst of the atmospheric fallout. You dip your fingers in and feel life humming beneath the current. Insects zip above the water. Frogs croak from somewhere unseen. There's no grandeur, no spectacle, just persistence. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some of the first mammals to truly thrive post-impact were burrowers. Fossil burrows dating from right after the Cretaceous show tight, twisty tunnels packed with bedding material and food scraps. Tiny furballs hoarding snacks underground while the sky collapsed. You smile, picturing one of them curling up beside a stash of seeds while the air outside burned. It wasn't heroic, but it worked. Above you, the birds are still singing. You spot one with vivid red feathers dancing between tree limbs. Another trails a thin strand of grass toward a half-built nest. The forest is echoing again, not with roars or howls, but with layers of music, territorial calls, mating songs, quiet twitters. It's as though the soundtrack of the planet has finally changed. But even here, in this gentle new beginning, you feel the ghost of what came before. You pause at a ridge overlooking a wide valley. Once, this was a stomping ground. You can almost hear the footfalls of a triceratops herd crossing the plain. You imagine a young T-Rex watching from the trees, calculating odds. The drama that played out here for millions of years, all gone. And yet, not entirely. The fossils remain. The seeds of their DNA, too, still echo in feathers, in talons, in the way a bird perches like it's ready to pounce. The dinosaurs didn't die off completely. They just downsized, shrank, got faster, smarter, lighter. Birds are what's left of the age of giants, and they wear that inheritance like a secret. You pass a skeleton half embedded in the earth, ribcage exposed, moss curling through its eye socket. A hadrosaur, maybe, or a ceratopsian too far gone to identify. The bones are cracked but still proud. You sit beside it for a while, listening to the wind. It's quiet now, not empty, just different. The age of dinosaurs is truly over, but the world they shaped is still here. Every bird, every mammal, every flowering plant is a child of their time. You realize then that survival doesn't always mean transformation. Sometimes it means carrying the memory forward, quietly, steadily, unnoticed until one day someone stops and looks. You do just that. You reach out and gently place a hand on the fossil's brow ridge. Not in mourning, in thanks for the roar, the thunder, the fire, and most of all for the silence that followed, where the survivors emerged and made something new. The sun is brighter now, the ash has thinned, the birds are building, the mammals are moving. The world has ended, and the world has begun again. You wake to the sharp smell of dynamite and the muffled grumbling of mustachioed men in wool coats. Gone are the ferns and ash-thick forests of the Cretaceous. Now, you're crouched behind a boulder on a dusty hillside in 19th century Wyoming, squinting through a cloud of grit as someone yells "fire in the hole" and promptly obliterates half the cliff face. Welcome to the Bone Wars. It's not a metaphor. Two men, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, stand a few yards apart pretending not to glare at each other. Technically, they're both brilliant paleontologists. Realistically, they're obsessed with destroying each other's reputations. And over the next few decades, they'll hurl insults, forge fossils, bribe dig crews, and sabotage digs all across the American West just to win the title of guy who found the most dinosaurs. This isn't science, it's personal. And yet it works. Because of their manic rivalry, more than 100 new dinosaur species are discovered in rapid succession. Some of the names will stick, like Stegosaurus, Apatosaurus, and Allosaurus. Others, not so much. Brontosaurus, for example, becomes a textbook legend, then gets demoted, then maybe gets re-promoted again. Historians still argue whether it's a valid genus or just the more photogenic cousin of Apatosaurus. Meanwhile, the public, who mostly just want big thunder lizards and fewer taxonomies, continue to love Brontosaurus regardless of what the scientists say. You watch as crates of bones are loaded onto carts, huge femurs wrapped in burlap, delicate skull fragments cushioned in hay. Somewhere, someone lights a cigar and steps on a toe bone worth more than his horse. The desert is littered with fossil fragments and egos. No one's wearing goggles. You step carefully through the chaos, watching assistants struggle to identify femurs that look suspiciously like tail bones and vice versa. Mistakes are frequent, documentation is, creative, and the speed at which species are being named borders on the absurd. Cope once reconstructs an Elasmosaurus with the head on the tail. Marsh gleefully points this out in public. Cope never recovers emotionally. But it's not just about names. It's about ownership. Fossils become currency. Landowners are bribed. Field crews defect. At one point, Marsh accuses Cope of dynamiting a dig site just to keep him from collecting more bones. Cope counters by publishing a list of Marsh's supposed errors in the New York Herald, turning what should have been a quiet academic feud into a front-page fossil soap opera. Still, amid the chaos, something remarkable is happening. You walk through a tent lined with skulls, huge and hollow-eyed, some with horns, others with toothy grins that look suspiciously smug. These are the bones of creatures long gone being brought into public awareness for the first time. The museums are hungry. The American Museum of Natural History, the Smithsonian, Yale's Peabody Museum. They all want skeletons to fill their echoing halls. Dinosaurs are no longer just scientific curiosities. They are cultural phenomena. And the people love them. You wander through a town square where schoolchildren crowd around an illustration of Diplodocus, all neck and tail, stretching across half the page like a scaly train. Women in corsets peer at lithographs of Triceratops. Newspaper headlines trumpet every new discovery like it's a World's Fair exhibit. Dinosaurs have become larger than life again, not in the ground, but in the imagination. But not everything uncovered is accurate. You find a display of early reconstructions, lumbering beasts with dragging tails and sprawling, lizard-like limbs. The first mounted Hadrosaurus stands upright like a parade float with scoliosis. It's all wrong, but it feels right to the public. The idea of dinosaurs as slow, stupid swamp dwellers sticks for generations. Even in museums, they're presented like oversized reptiles too foolish to evolve properly. Here's your quirky tidbit. During this era, some naturalists believed dinosaurs were cold-blooded failures, creatures so unfit that nature simply gave up on them. One even wrote that dinosaurs were God's mistakes, a divine typo eventually corrected by mammals. Meanwhile, in dusty rail cars and cluttered basements, scientists are piecing together new revelations: more flexible limbs, signs of herding behavior, bone histology suggesting warm-blooded metabolisms. But these ideas won't catch on just yet. Not until much later, when the image of the sluggish behemoth finally begins to crack. Still, here in the 1880s and 1890s, the mythology is cementing itself. Dinosaurs are monsters, curiosities, marvels of deep time. You watch as a young boy stares wide-eyed at a painted mural of a megalosaurus attacking something vaguely horse-shaped, and you know this image will stay with him for life. It's not accurate, but it matters. Back at the dig site, Cope storms off after a heated exchange with one of his assistants. Marsh mutters something snide into his mustache. Behind them, a field worker carefully brushes dust off a pelvis and whistles, unaware that he's holding what will eventually be called Camarasaurus. No one pats him on the back. The bone wars will end eventually, not with a handshake but with exhaustion. Cope dies in debt, still bitter. Marsh, too, spends his last years writing scathing rebuttals to critics he's convinced are part of a conspiracy. Their feud leaves behind a trail of damaged reputations, questionable science, and fractured friendships. But it also lays the groundwork for modern paleontology. You climb to the top of a sandstone ridge and look out over the dig site, bone shards scattered, pickaxes gleaming in the late afternoon light. The landscape is quiet for a moment, just wind and dust and the faint call of a crow overhead. And then you realize the dinosaurs are being resurrected, not with magic, not with cloning, but with obsession, pettiness, and pure, unrelenting curiosity. And while the fossils lie still in their crates, waiting to be studied properly, their story is already loose in the world, half true, half legend, wholly irresistible. You step back from the edge, brush fossil dust from your palms, and smile. Science, it seems, doesn't always wear a lab coat. Sometimes it wears a very loud hat and throws dynamite at a hill. You're standing in a sleek, modern lab now, glass walls, humming LED lights, climate control just cool enough to keep the bones from sweating. No dust, no pickaxes, no mustachioed feuds playing out in the dirt. Just quiet clicks of keyboards and the whir of imaging machines. It's a far cry from the chaos of the bone wars, but don't let the calm fool you. The fight over dinosaurs is still very much alive. It's just evolved. You walk past a long table covered in what looks like an oversized jigsaw puzzle. Vertebrae, fragments of pelvic bones, a few clawed phalanges arranged with obsessive precision. A paleontologist leans over the display, squinting at a femur under a magnifying lamp. He scribbles something in a notebook, mutters, "This is not an iguanodon," and immediately flips the name tag over. Identity crisis at its finest. Because here's the thing, we're not just discovering dinosaurs anymore, we're redefining them. In recent decades, advances in technology, CT scans, isotopic analysis, microscopic bone structure imaging, have given paleontologists a new kind of X-ray vision. What once required speculation can now be tested with data. Growth rates, metabolism, social behavior, even color patterns, these are no longer academic guesses. They're subjects of real, testable hypotheses. And with that precision has come one giant, ongoing headache, the family tree. You pause in front of a massive phylogenetic diagram stretched across the wall. It's shaped like a spider web mid-explosion, lines connecting dots that represent species, branches intersecting, splitting, reforming. It's a mess. And right at the center of it is a very uncomfortable question. What is a dinosaur anyway? Historians still argue loudly over the exact structure of the dinosaur family tree. The traditional division, Saurischia versus Ornithischia, has held for over a century. Lizard-hipped and bird-hipped, nice and clean. But in 2017, a paper flipped the whole thing upside down, suggesting that theropods, including T-Rex and birds, might be more closely related to the bird-hipped ornithischians than to sauropods. It's like finding out your weird cousin with the neck spikes is actually your sibling, and your best friend is some distant uncle who just happens to be 100 feet long. The debate that followed was fierce. Papers were written, counterpapers were written, conference panels turned tense. One respected paleontologist described it as a total phylogenetic earthquake, and the fault lines are still shifting. You wander over to a digital screen cycling through images of Tyrannosaurus rex. First, it's the classic lizard-like beast, smooth skin, oversized head, dragging tail. Then it morphs, slightly leaner, more upright posture. Then again, this time feathers sprout along its arms and spine. A mane of fluff, almost bird-like. The tail lifts. The forearms still look ridiculous, but the rest, regal. And here where it gets tricky. Feathers on T-Rex, maybe. Juvenile fossils of related species show feather impressions. Many experts think young rexes might have had a fuzzy coat that was lost as they matured, like baby chicks that grow out of their fluff. Others argue that adults may have retained feathers along certain body parts for display or thermoregulation. Still others, frustratingly practical, point out that at 9 tons, feathers might have been unnecessary insulation. When you're that big, you're your own furnace. So the debate rages on. You pass another researcher huddled over a fossilized bone cross-section under a microscope. She points to faint rings, like tree rings, but in bone, evidence of seasonal growth, pauses in development. Dinosaurs, it seems, didn't grow constantly. They grew fast in youth, slowed down as adults. Some reached maturity in under a decade. Others, like sauropods, may have grown non-stop for decades before topping out. You ask her how long T-Rex lived. She shrugs. Best guess, around 28 years. Fast rise, fast fall. She sips her coffee and returns to counting bone rings like a time traveler, scanning a diary written in calcium. You wander into a back room, where a 3D printer is slowly reconstructing a missing part of a theropod jaw. Next to it, a graduate student with wild hair and a more wild spreadsheet argues with a tablet. It's not a dromaeosaur, he insists to no one in particular. It's not, the tail's all wrong. No one answers, he starts over. Paleontology in the 21st century is a hybrid beast. Part detective work, part computer science, part diplomacy. The fossils rarely give up all their secrets, and when they do, they often contradict themselves. One year, a fossil is classified under a known genus. The next, it's reclassified. Then, a decade later, it's split into 2 new species and inspires a TV documentary. You pass a bulletin board titled Taxonomic Revisions. There are sticky notes, color-coded, some angrily underlined. One says Nanotyrannus equals teen T-Rex. Another, revisit Torosaurus versus Triceratops again. And your favorite, no more raptor names without a vote. That last one feels personal. Here's your quirky historical footnote. For a while, paleontologists had a habit of naming new species based on very little, sometimes just a single tooth or bone fragment. That's how we got names like Ultrasaurus and Dracorex hogwartsia, which, despite the fantasy flavor, was once thought to be a distinct species, but may just be a juvenile Pachycephalosaurus. The name's still great, though. And through all of it, you notice something quietly profound. The dinosaurs are no longer just bones in the ground. They're puzzles in motion. The image of these creatures isn't fixed. It evolves with every new fossil, every computer model, every revised data set. Paleontology isn't about solving a mystery. It's about continually rewriting the mystery as the evidence changes. You step into the museum's main hall just as a tour group of kids spills in. They look up at the reconstructed T-Rex, eyes wide, jaws slack. One kid points to the feathers and whispers, "It looks like a bird." His friend says, "No way, that thing's a monster." They're both right. You sit on a bench nearby, letting their chatter fill the air. The fossil doesn't move. It hasn't for 66 million years. But the way we understand it, that changes by the hour. And maybe that's the most dinosaur thing of all. The museum lights dim just slightly as the theater screen flickers to life. You settle into a creaky seat surrounded by popcorn crumbs and the unmistakable rustle of plastic jackets. On screen, a silhouette appears, a giant claw, then a toe tap, then a full, hungry velociraptor, rendered in flawless CGI, snarling as it opens a kitchen door. The audience gasps, some because it's thrilling, others because, well, kitchen doors. Welcome to the cultural resurrection of the dinosaurs, where science takes a backseat to spectacle and accuracy gets photoshopped in post-production. You're sitting in the dark heart of pop culture's fossil frenzy, and the image of the dinosaur has never been louder, faster, or more marketable. It started long before the kitchen scene. The 20th century had already made dinosaurs into icons. Comic books, stop-motion battles, toys that roared if you hit them hard enough. There was Gertie the dinosaur in 1914, swaying and blinking in cartoonish innocence. Then came the B-movie monsters, tyrannosaurs eating cars, pterosaurs snatching damsels off city rooftops. By the 1950s, Godzilla had stomped onto the world stage, a radioactive metaphor with unmistakable dino DNA. Not accurate, of course, but deeply memorable. And then in 1993, Jurassic Park crashed through the gates and rewrote everything. You wander now through the museum's temporary exhibit, themed to match the film's 30th anniversary. Posters line the walls, sleek, dark silhouettes against amber backdrops. Animatronic heads twitch on cue. A sound station loops that iconic rumbling roar. Not real, of course, but a blend of tortoise mating and slowed-down elephant cries. Still gives people chills. You stop at a plaque that reads, "What did we get wrong?" and let out a quiet laugh. Where to begin? Velociraptors, for starters, were the size of turkeys. Real ones, not Thanksgiving ones, and they likely had feathers. But Spielberg's raptors, 7 feet long, scaly, cunning as horror villains, and completely featherless. Why? Because in 1993, no one wanted to see a fluffy bird open a door. They wanted monsters. Even T-Rex got a makeover. In the films, it runs at highway speeds, sees motion like a frog, and roars like thunder. In real life, probably a slower-paced ambush predator, with decent vision and a bite designed less for noise and more for obliteration. Also, still not confirmed whether it could dance on crushed jeeps in the rain. But you get it, accuracy wasn't the point, wonder was. You lean on a railing overlooking a diorama. A dromaeosaur pack, very raptor-wise, surrounds a protoceratops, teeth bared, claws raised, feathers flared. The text beneath it points out this may have been one of the most common predator-prey pairings of the late Cretaceous. One fossil even froze them mid-battle, locked forever in combat. The exhibit gives the science. But behind you, a kid in a dino hoodie whispers, "That's the guy from the movie." He's not wrong. Pop culture bleeds into perception. And once dinosaurs became cool, they stopped being just prehistoric animals. They became characters. You stroll past shelves of dino-themed cereal boxes, vintage toys, rubber hand puppets that once ruled Happy Meals. Some of the designs are hilariously off-base. Bright purple stegosaurs with mohawks, orange tyrannosaurs with 3 fingers and cheeky grins, But all of them say the same thing: dinosaurs are fun. They're for everyone. Even music got involved. You remember that viral song, don't you? Dinosaur Stomp. Or maybe that prehistoric-themed boy band that called themselves the Reptiles. It was inevitable. Everything that leaves a fossil eventually leaves a ringtone. Of course, not all pop culture dinosaurs are lovable. Horror leans in too. You pass a screening room showing clips from low-budget monster films. Carnosaurs with laser eyes, spliced hybrids that glow in the dark, clones gone wrong. These aren't trying to teach. They're trying to entertain, and maybe in some small way keep that primal fear alive. After all, it's hardwired into us to flinch at teeth, claws, and things that go thump in the foliage. You pause at a touchscreen quiz labeled, "Are you smarter than a stegosaurus?" The answer, surprisingly, is only maybe. Pop culture has long mocked the stegosaurus's tiny brain, about the size of a walnut, but recent research suggests it wasn't quite that dumb. It had specialized nerves and a decently complex behavior pattern. Still, the joke stuck. 100 years of cartoons and sitcom punchlines are hard to undo. Here's your quirky historical footnote. In the 1980s, a children's book briefly popularized the theory that dinosaurs were aliens stranded on Earth. Another, less imaginative theory claimed they were demons from pre-biblical times. Neither lasted, but the fossils somehow kept showing up on late-night cable and conspiracy blogs, mingling with UFOs and lost cities. You sit on a bench near the exit, surrounded by shelves of dinosaur plushies, backpacks, and plastic claws, and something hits you. No extinct animal has ever achieved this level of fame. Mammoths, impressive but lacking personality. Saber-toothed cats, stylish but niche. But dinosaurs, they're immortal, not biologically but culturally. The fact that kids know their names before they can spell reptile says everything. And now, in the age of TikTok and AI-generated deep dino fakes, the mythologies continue. Feathered or not, accurate or exaggerated, dinosaurs remain avatars of imagination. People draw them with top hats. They're featured in courtroom memes. Someone, probably working on a musical right now where T-Rex sings about self-acceptance. Historians still argue whether pop culture helps or hurts public understanding of dinosaurs. On one hand, it spreads interest. On the other, it cements inaccuracies. But maybe that's okay. Science changes. The image will catch up. You glance up at the towering skeleton once more. A Spinosaurus, this one with its crocodile snout and sail-like spine, posed mid-lunge. It's scientifically up-to-date for now. But you know that in 10 years, someone will tweak the tail posture, change the foot angle, add a ridge of feathers. Maybe it'll start swimming again. Maybe it'll grow gills. The story never ends. And as the museum closes its doors, and a kid in a raptor costume tugs their parent toward the gift shop, you smile. Because dinosaurs didn't just walk the earth. They marched right into our heads, and they've never left. You follow the hallway past the official museum exhibits, into a less polished annex that smells faintly of printer ink, hot glue, and ambition. Here, the walls are plastered with articles, internet screen grabs, newspaper clippings, and the occasional "Do not touch" sign hastily taped to an unconvincing replica skull. Welcome to the outer edge of paleontology, where cloning dreams, evolutionary experiments, outright hoaxes, and more than a few questionable theories all gather to clink glasses and whisper, "What if?" This is where science meets speculation, and sometimes full-on pseudoscience. You stop first at a display labeled De-Extinction Projects. It's got glossy renderings of what appear to be baby velociraptors in lab-grown eggs, a whiteboard of CRISPR code mock-ups, and a looping video of a very enthusiastic man in a lab coat saying things like, "Feathers are just switched-on genes, folks." He's not wrong. Birds are dinosaurs. and buried within their DNA, between the flight adaptations and modern tweaks, may lie dormant traits that echo their ancient ancestors. This brings you to the infamous Dino Chicken Project. Scientists at Harvard and Yale have already done it, tweaking chicken embryos so that they grow snouts instead of beaks, or primitive tails instead of the compact Pangaea-style modern birds carry. The idea isn't to build a T-Rex from scratch. It's to reverse engineer certain traits to better understand how they evolved in the first place. But of course, that line between research and resurrection blurs fast when you throw in media hype. You tap a screen that plays a 2016 interview with a researcher saying, only half joking, "We're not creating dinosaurs, but we could create something very dinosaur-like." Cue ominous music and the phrase Jurassic reality flashing on screen. But this room doesn't stop at semi-serious science. Turn left and you're staring into the deeply suspicious eyes of the Mokolembem, a supposed living sauropod rumored to live in the Congo Basin. Never mind that the evidence mostly consists of vague sketches and fishermen describing large hippos that got a little out of hand. Still, cryptozoologists insist dinosaurs never really died out. They just went remote. Across the aisle, another display outlines the infamous Piltdown chicken hoax, an incident in the 1990s when a supposed new dinosaur fossil surfaced in China, complete with bird-like features. Turns out it was a composite, a carefully glued-together mashup of bird and non-avian dinosaur bones. It fooled scientists at first, but when exposed, it reminded everyone. In paleontology, peer review is your best friend, and glue is a red flag. Here's a favorite of conspiracy-minded guests, a printout of the supposed Ica stones, found in Peru and famously etched with scenes of humans riding dinosaurs. There's zero scientific credibility. Most were made in the 20th century with rotary tools. Still, they cling to the internet like ticks, passed around in comment sections as proof that history books are lying. You sigh and move on. Then there's the cloning dream. You approach a glass case containing a large mosquito trapped in amber. A plaque beside it winks. No, this won't work. Pop culture drilled the idea into our heads that dinosaur DNA could be extracted from amber-preserved insects. Thanks again, Jurassic Park. But real-world science has been less romantic. DNA degrades fast. The half-life of DNA under ideal conditions is about 521 years. After a few million, it's gone. No matter how many mosquitoes we dig up, there's no T-Rex genome just waiting to be copied and pasted. Still, that hasn't stopped some from trying. In 2020, a study announced traces of what might have been preserved organic material in a Hypacrosaurus embryo. Headlines flared. Soft tissue found in dinosaur fossil. But those headlines rarely explained how complicated it is to distinguish fossilized proteins from modern contamination. Historians still argue whether what being found is true preservation or just geochemistry playing tricks on us. You pause at a timeline scrawled across the wall, speculative milestones in de-extinction. 2025, first viable dino-avian hybrid. 2030, feathered zoo exhibits. 2045, designer dinosaurs for luxury safari parks. The last one is circled in red with a question mark, and beneath it someone scribbled, "Please don't let this be a real thing." The ethics of it all hang heavy in the air. If we could bring back a dinosaur or something close, should we? Where would it live? What would it eat? Would it suffer in a world not built for it? Would we parade it around like a novelty or treat it with the same respect we give endangered modern species? These aren't hypothetical questions anymore. They're starting to matter. You wander past a rack of unauthorized theories, illustrations of T-Rex with bat wings, Spinosaurus rendered as a quadrupedal crocodile-lizard hybrid, and a particularly bold poster titled "Dinosaurs were actually mammals." The pamphlet makes the rounds on internet forums every few months, always rehashed, always eager to stir the pot. There's no shortage of fringe takes in dino discourse, but you start to wonder if some of that chaos is the point. Dinosaurs are a scientific field, yes, but they're also an invitation to imagine, to reach, to speculate. Not all of it holds up. Much of it falls apart under scrutiny. But somewhere in the mess of hoaxes and hopeful gene edits and speculative biology is the same instinct that drove Marsh and Cope to blow up hillsides with dynamite: the need to know. You exit the annex into a more conventional exhibit, blinking under brighter lights. The bones here are quiet, labeled, verified, comfortingly stable, but even they feel a little more alive now, having seen how often truth and fiction rub shoulders in the pursuit of ancient life. And as you walk past a feathered Deinonychus model preening in a glass case, you catch your reflection beside it. For just a moment, you wonder who looks more like the future of dinosaurs, the fossil, or you. You step outside into the fresh air, leaving behind the echoing corridors of bones, the buzzing labs, and the velvetroped exhibits of speculative science. It's quieter out here, but not silent. Birds flit between trees. A sparrow lands on a bench beside you, tilts its head, and pecks at a crumb. In that simple motion, beak to wood, feathers ruffled, you see 100 million years of continuity. The age of dinosaurs didn't end. It just changed costume. Every chirp is a fossil whisper, every flap of wings, a nod to ancestors with claws and teeth. The dinosaurs never vanished. They shrunk, they adapted, and most of all, they learned to fly. You stroll through the city park, watching pigeons bicker like tiny feathered velociraptors. Their claws scrape the concrete, their eyes dart with uncanny sharpness. A red-tailed hawk circles overhead, talons curled, wings outstretched. It screeches, high and raw, and in that sound you hear echoes of Archaeopteryx, of Microraptor, of theropods that once ruled the undergrowth. The flightless ones still strut, too. Emus, ostriches, cassowaries, walking paradoxes of the ancient and the now. Here's your final quirky fact. Modern birds still carry dinosaur traits deep in their bones. Hollow structures, wishbones, and even the genes for teeth, long since switched off. Chickens, of all things, still hold latent genetic blueprints for snouts, claws, even tails. Scientists have nudged some of those genes back on, just far enough to glimpse what once was. And yet, every bird is proof that survival favors reinvention, not nostalgia. You pause near a small pond where ducks glide in lazy loops, their feathers iridescent in the sunlight. Kids toss breadcrumbs. Parents point and smile. None of them are thinking about Cretaceous apex predators, but you are, because it's all there, hidden beneath feathers and song and the illusion of modernity. The ghosts of the Mesozoic walk among us, not in terror but in triumph. Historians still argue over what defines the end of an era. Is it when the big ones die off, or when the small ones take over? In the case of dinosaurs, the answer is strange and beautiful. The era never truly ended. It just passed the torch. The age of reptiles flowed into the age of birds without ever really stopping. Evolution didn't draw a line in the sand. It drew a feathered arc into the sky. You lean against a railing and look up. Swifts and swallows flicker above the treetops, performing aerial stunts their ancestors could have only dreamed of. These are the final form, the slim, efficient, gravity-defying survivors. No tails to drag them down, no jaws filled with serrated knives, just beaks and wings and speed. Dinosaurs, reborn as artists of the wind. And what about us? We didn't evolve from them, but we grew up alongside their memory. Every fossil we dig, every theory we rewrite, every mural we paint or toy we give a child, those are ways we keep them present. Not just as bones, but as ideas, possibilities, warnings, dreams. Dinosaurs remind us how fast things can change, how dominance is temporary, how fragility can be hidden inside power. You think back to that first Eoraptor scurrying through Triassic ferns, to the T-Rex stamping across the Cretaceous plains, to the long-necked sauropods reshaping forests with every bite. You remember the feathers in the forest, the nests beneath the ash, the spark that flew up from catastrophe and never truly went out. You hear it now in birdsong, and you understand, finally, why their story matters so much. Because even if we never see a real one stomp down the street, or clone one from amber or build them back in a lab, dinosaurs are still here, perched on phone lines, splashing in bird baths, nesting in gutters. We live among their ghosts not in fear but in familiarity. You take a slow breath and close your eyes. The air carries a feather or two on the breeze, and somewhere above, a mockingbird sings a few borrowed notes. The world changed, but they never really left.